Hello.
That's my favorite meeting of the year.
Although
Live and unmuted.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome everyone. I'd like to open the Norwich School Board regular meeting of May 4th, 2022, and we'll get right into it with our agenda review. I had thought about moving some things around, but I think we'll keep it where it is unless anyone else has any objections. I just haven't, I put an addition as a teacher that we were able to interview and present to the board. I added for fifth grade. Okay, we'll be executive session. Anything else?
No, it seems like it just seems like you have the teachers first, which seems like the right way to go. So.
Yes. We actually moved the childcare, so we have to review it. At this point, why don't we do that? Are you all here for environmental? Lindsay, really? Would you like us to move you up on the agenda?
Yeah.
Good?
Thank you.
All right. Rep, do you mind going second? Okay. So if no one objects, we'll move the environmental educator up to 5A after the report from the PTO. Great. Thank you very much. So next up is public comments. And actually, I have one. Rebecca, would you like to also move up on our agenda this evening? Would you like to move up on our agenda this evening?
I'm here to just help me out.
You're here to help me. What would you like? Why don't we, sorry, we've got, we've got environmental educator, then that's doing IDEA and special ed policy, and then childcare. Yeah, let's do it. I think that should be it. So we'll stick. Let's move down our list, and next up is public input, and I see that Mark has seen up online. Is anyone here? Look at, and this is the point in time where you can address anything that ideally is not on our agenda already. I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak. I think you just need to unmute yourself now and state your name and where.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can. Okay. Thanks. Audio is a little staticky on my end. Mark Aquila on New Boston Road. I'll try a second time. Mark Aquila on New Boston Road. Will there be a progress report on the septic during the facilities section of today's meeting, or with a different topic, a different time?
We will address that today, yes.
Great, thank you. I'll ask then.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Not seeing any, let's move on to our agenda. First up are reports in the PTO report, that is, and I do see that it looks like Stephanie is online. So Stephanie, I'm going to promote you to panelist. And you have Stephanie's report in your report box.
Hello, good evening, everybody. The news from past April for the PTO was that we successfully had the mud stomp on April 22nd. That was postponed for several years because of COVID, because it's a in-person dance. But we had that at the MCS gym. And David Millstone, who I guess used to be an MCS teacher and is now the caller of the contra dancing, came back. And to help keep costs down, a lot of local parent musicians were part of the band, which I thought was pretty cool. It was well attended and the kids danced a lot. Some parents even danced a lot, so that was kind of fun. And we had a bake sale as well to kind of offset some of the costs. So it was kind of nice to have, it's a tradition that's been come back that had been gone for a couple of years. And I think everyone had a good time. So hopefully that'll continue. This week is Teacher Appreciation Week, May 2nd through the 6th. And the PTO in the past has had people make pies for like everybody, like all staff members, custodians, ed assistants, everybody. And last year, because of COVID, and I think the year before, we ended up giving gift certificates and to King Arthur Bakery, which I guess was well received because not everybody likes pie, and that way you can use a gift certificate for other things. So we did that again this year, and we were hoping just to give people $22 because that's the average cost of a pie, and because everybody was so generous, we think we'll be able to get, I think it's like $27 or $28 gift certificates, and give those out this week. So that's very cool. So thank you to everybody who donated towards that and keeping that tradition going. We have our final year meeting tomorrow night at the Inn, just to say thank you to all of our volunteers. So that's kind of nice. And then we have a coffee and conversation coming up with Sean. We're going to keep that to Zoom because we found that we get more people when they keep it to Zoom. And then Bike to School Day is going to actually this year be on the 18th of May. So that's it for now. Any questions?
Great. Thanks very much, Stephanie. Any questions? All right. Well, thank you as always for all that you do. Thanks for all that you're putting in towards the Teacher Appreciation Week. Glad to hear that the Mud Stomp is back on. And thanks for getting us all through the year. And thank you for your service as the co-chair of the PTO. Is this your last meeting then, or will we see you in June?
I think you'll see me in June, and then you get to see Molly and Rebecca.
All right, then transition. All right, well, thanks for everything, Stephanie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, moving down our list, we did just reorganize. So the first item up is the environment of Educator. And Sean, did you want to kick this off in terms of those?
I'll say very little because I know Becky has prepared a very eloquent speech. We've been working, this team has been working with me to look at the environmental education position. We're taking a huge hit this year with Lindsay deciding to join the retirement people instead of us, even though we've tried really hard to get her to continue to stay. We haven't given up. But we thought this is the perfect time to think about the position. We are changing personnel. This is an opportunity to think what we want this position to be. Grow it a little bit.
Sean, can you speak up just a little? I'm getting people online are having trouble hearing. And, is there a fan back? We need to shut that.
It's our COVID cleaner.
Oh, it's a COVID thing, so we can't shut off.
We can use that. Anyway,
We'll see if
now that I'm closer to the owl,
yes.
Becky is going to talk to us a little bit about what the committee has come up with for a revised job description, what we're thinking the position could be.
Okay.
So is that where I stand?
That's
what I do?
microphone, yes.
That's microphone, okay. So I'm here alone, but I want you to imagine me surrounded by many people. When Sean told us, when we heard that Lindsay was retiring, we had a staff meeting to talk about the position, look at the old job description, which is basically Lindsay, is the only person to ever held the job. And what came out of that meeting really quickly was how important this is to everyone. And also that, as sad as we are to see Lindsay go, there's a real opportunity here to make it grow and make it something else. I know I don't have to convince any of you how important this work is. You have had children who have gone through LEAP. We all know that people move to Norwich and mention the outdoor connection as one of the reasons they're moving. So I think we can just say that that's true. What we want to look for is a way to even strengthen that commitment to outdoor education. And Lindsay's departure gives us an opportunity to do that. So what we're looking at hoping for, is a full-time teaching position that would be compensated in the way that all teaching positions are. This is a great time for this transformation. Lindsay has provided us a great opportunity. First off, COVID pushed us outdoors. We did it for our physical health, and we quickly reminded ourselves how important it was to our mental health and how wonderful learning in the outdoors can be. But we could be better at it. We are good at sort of the obvious things, the teaching of science, the exploration, but we could be better at teaching the core subjects in the outdoors. And having somebody who is a real expert in outdoor education could help all of the teachers to do a better job of that. We have classrooms in the woods. We've been trained in outdoor education. COVID got the momentum started, and this is a great opportunity to keep it going. The other reason it's great timing is the whole district long-range planning initiative. As you all saw, the top priority was the environment. This is a time to be pushing that. People have expressed a desire for us to stress things like appreciating nature, like learning to be responsible in the decision-making that we do that affects the environment. And so again, riding the long-range planning, this is a great time for that. So what would the position look like? In our view, it would be what we have now for sure. The habitat studies, stewardship activities like Green Up Day, community service activities like the Willing Hands Garden, all of that and all of the things Lindsay do would be part of it. But the job has grown organically over time. And even Lindsay would say, you know, we could do things a little differently. And if we hire someone, they're going to come in with new passions and new visions for how this could be. The things we really want to enhance, as I said, teaching in the outdoors is something that we could get better at, not just the habitat studies, but teaching the core subjects, English, math, doing that effectively in the outdoors. The other thing is that the teaching of science generally has really broadened. NGSS went through in 2013, and that really transformed science education from teaching science to kids really being scientists. And that's different from what we all did when we learned, and different from how a lot of teachers were trained to teach science. And so we want kids doing that, and this person could help us to transform that by being a real expert in NGSS, by being an expert in hands-on education, in experiential science learning. Matt Buck and Lindsay have really spearheaded the science committee to make a lot of progress towards aligning with NGSS, but we still have a long way to go. And so this person would help with that as well. This is an area of the curriculum that has tremendous opportunity for collaboration with specialists and among various areas, but teachers could use some support to make that happen. And so those are the sort of time, why now, and what would it look like in our vision? That would be it. So thank you all for considering. And we have lots of people if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Becky. Do we have, and then just to be clear too, this is for next year. For next year?
Yes.
Yes.
What we would like is, ideally, would be a full-time 1.0 FTE. So it would be, what the money set aside for Lindsay supplemented to reach whatever is necessary for the new hire.
Lindsay, you wrote to us on this earlier. Did you want to, I don't want to not give you an opportunity to talk to me.
Becky said it very well, and I'm just thankful to be here.
But we're thankful that you have been. And early thanks for all that you've done for you. Any questions from the board? Yeah.
Well, a lot, right? And but I know you said it this time, so I'm not quite sure where, how much of this conversation did you want to have tonight?
Well, I think we can get questions out there to address what the next steps would be. Right? Because I think we'll need to decide where we go with the recommendations.
I guess my initial question then is, if we look at a 1.0 FTE, is this a position that would necessarily fall within the step and track system? Is this a classroom teacher type position, or would this fall outside of that hire?
The way this job description was created, it would be all within the teaching.
And do you know enough now about how it might be utilized? Would this person actually be in the classroom teaching, or I'm trying to get a sense of how we use this 1.0 FTE, because it sounds like it's a little bit out of the ordinary as to how we use all of the other FTEs in the building, right?
That's a good question. So I'll speak to it then. The way I see this, Nice to hear the note. The way I see this working is similar to a coach position. So this year we're hiring a math coach at a grant funded position. And that person will go in the classroom, will work with teachers, but will also provide some professional development. We'll work maybe with a few kids outside of that classroom time. So I see this position as pushing in, helping teachers to teach the science curriculum better and different. Also working with Robin and teams of teachers to do curriculum work around science, and doing all the things that we already is in the community outreach, service projects, and all of our other pieces. I don't see this as someone who would be in a classroom teaching kids without teachers being part of that piece. Anyone wants to add?
My vision's the same. So co-teaching, for sure, we do that already. You know, I know where my students are in this moment and what their skills are with relating to writing and reading and things like that. And Lindsay brings the science perspective, and we can sort of bounce back and forth between each other. Definitely still that, but then all the other things that Sean mentioned as well.
But would be a certified teacher by Vermont Center.
And that's something that we've talked about as a group, that one of the pros and cons is the pros are that we have someone who is trained to be with kids and do the instructional piece. But the cons could be that it limits us to some people who may be out there that have a lot of great science outside of school background that could come and enhance our program. But in the end, we decided that a licensed teacher may be our best option.
Can I just ask a clarifying question, which is what are we meant to be doing with this?
Well, I think that's good. This is obviously the first time we did hear about this previously, but not in detail. This is a little bit more detailed than we've had, and the proposal for the actual position itself is the first that we've heard of it, and this certainly is one point I have to be and being part of the teacher's contract is a little bit different than what I had understood. So what are you looking for in terms of what next steps the board would take here? Because obviously this isn't in the budget at this level either, which is already been passed.
So for me, I would like to know what interest is on the board's part of pursuing this position. Maybe I could see you saying, go back and work with Jamie to talk about how it can be funded. Because we talked as a team and we realized that we budgeted for Lindsay's position, which is very different than a full-time FTE position. But it doesn't mean that there aren't some opportunities outside of the budget that we can pursue this year. And within the budget, there may be a couple of areas where we can do it. But for me, I would just like to know, is this something that the board says we support? Do we leap into this direction? And if so, do we have the ability to work with Jamie, look at our funding and see, can we afford this? And to what extent can we afford it this year? And then go from there.
Yeah, just wondering, it's May, and I know that kind of teacher contract season and getting people who want to start earlier than now to fill a position that would start July 1, or I guess I forget when contracts actually start, August 1, July 1, whenever they start in the summer. And so I'm wondering if that's a concern about doing it that way for this year. My gut says I want to support what the teachers want. Like, I feel like you guys have gotten a lot of thought into this, but I'm wondering if we're limiting ourselves in terms of who might actually be available to keep LEAP going next year by making it a classroom teacher, a certified teacher right away, instead of maybe hiring someone for 1 year interim and then having it be a classroom person the year after that. I'm not saying that's the best way to do it. I'm trying to play out the best way to get someone qualified who can start, because what I don't want to happen is for LEAP not to happen because we don't have someone who can make it happen.
A few things. I guess in answer to that, I think if we do find if we were able to find grant funding, that we certainly want to advertise it as a 1 year position, at least a initial year. First of all, I applaud the work that you've done. You put a lot of thought into this. I did meet with Lindsay, and we talked about just how important this program is, and I fully support expanding it, strengthening it, doing whatever we need to do to make sure that we're able to continue to do this important work. That said, I think there are a few things we still need to figure out. I'm curious as to what certification area, what endorsement would you think a candidate would have?
I think in our case, it would probably be a K-6 endorsement. Makes sense.
Sure. With appropriate outdoor education experience as well. So I guess that's all 3 points I wanted to make.
Well, to come back to Lisa's question, what is the thought process with regard to the timing of all of this and the pool of applicants that would be out? Because that is a concern of mine too, as well as I would like to see a budget process to consider. We haven't, and it's not.
Well, I found that this year the pool of candidates is like a vernal pool. It's constantly drying up. But this is a different type of position. I think if I heard tonight that there is some interest in looking forward, I might advertise it as an anticipated position. See what we get. We've advertised Lindsay's position as anticipated applicants. See what the pool is and let's get started.
Another question, sorry. I'm wondering, would you be willing to get somebody who is maybe like a Montshire type educator and help them get certified as a K-6 teacher if that was the best way to fill the position? Like, I'm just trying to play with this because again, I don't want LEAP to not happen. So, and I'm just wondering if that would be a possibility. I know sometimes we help them get certified for the state of Vermont if they have certification in New York instead of here.
That's a Jake question.
It would all depend on the situation. We certainly could apply for a provisional license to become a candidate. I don't know. I think there could be people out there. I know you have a person on staff who has a background in outdoor education that she brought in addition to her teaching credentials. I think advertising it, even if we do it as an anticipated vacancy, we'll at least test the waters and be able to answer you a little more detail.
And then with that in mind, we come back to the June meeting with the budget and other background.
And we
Garrett.
I said what I think I heard as this on the way in. So is there, and this might be more accomplished, but is there, I know you want to do a full accredited teacher. Is there budget implications if we didn't do that? And would that open our pool? And I guess I just kind of a private school background where there's you can't just be a Dartmouth graduate and teacher at this school because you want educators. They go down and teach in all these private schools. So I guess does that open our pool and get someone that might be better for this position? And maybe we don't have to. Maybe we keep it open and we don't make it. So it's two questions. One, should we keep it open and take both certified and non-certified, and then are there budget implications because if they're not certified and they would not be part of the union? So,
Well, the question we had, and maybe someone can answer it, was what we don't want to get is in the same position where with what we have with Lindsay, someone who we don't feel is being properly compensated for the work that they're doing. And so is there a position, right now it feels like all we have are support staff and teachers, like those are the two contracts we have. Is there another thing? If there was another thing, as we did talk about this idea that there could be some very qualified people out there, but we want to be sure that they're going to be, like a teacher, the expectations like a teacher, compensated like a teacher. And so if there was another thing, another vein for paying people, I think we're open to that idea. And really what we want is the best person for the job, the best person for the kids, the best, and it isn't necessarily a certified teacher, but just trying to understand the logistics behind it. And so if someone else has an answer to how that could work, we've talked about it, we're open to that.
I think based on what you all described, we
year was somewhat limited, and we probably have to have somebody who's got a proper teaching license.
But that's not necessarily limiting, as this is a different position. You know, we're not competing with other people for a third grade teacher. There aren't a lot of elementary schools that have a position like this. And we meanwhile have a program like Antioch that does a lot with place-based education, environmental education, is putting people out that have this as a passion. And we put up a job for it. It might be that lots of people say, oh gosh, this is so much better than what I'm doing now. And we may get a lot. We won't know until we try it. But it's not like, it's not people pulling for someone from a similar job. It's really a different kind of job.
I think if we put it out as anticipated, we would know within a couple of weeks. If we don't get any candidates, then I think we go back to the drawing board and say, okay, this maybe isn't the right direction for this position.
I think under normal circumstances, this is something that I would really like to pursue, but as we're going to get to it later in the agenda, the impending storm cloud that is implementation of this weighting study has me worried quite a bit, and it has nothing to do with the value or the add-on of a position like this, but I think that in a matter of months, we're going to be having discussions on what part of the budget needs to get cut and not what do we want to add to the budget. And while I would support, moving forward and investigating the budgetary implications of something like this, I worry that even if you were to pursue something for the following year with grant funding, then that just makes you then need to find that grant funding each successive year over the next 5 to 10 years. Otherwise, people are just going to say, you just need to fold it into the budget. And we're looking at, potential tax rate increase of 20% or more in this town, spread over a 5 to 6 year period, which means multiple years of successive budget increases guaranteed before we even add to the budget. And so I gotta say, personally, I'm hesitant to add an unbudgeted amount to a budget that was just passed by voters back in March by looking to increase the set. And honestly, it has nothing to do with the merit of the position.
Well,
If taxes are gonna keep going up and up and up over the next 5 years, I feel like in order to attract new families here, we're going to need just this sort of position under non-funding project.
I here have been on this journey with you to understand what's going to go on for Ladies Day too. That said, I would still be interested in seeing what kind of creative budgeting we could do. And you know where we are right now, and you know what we might have. I certainly would not want to make this more than a 1 year position. So be a trial one to see what it would look. I know that could be limiting, but we're starting so late in the process too. It's limiting itself. And if it's listed as anticipatory and you come back and realize that the budgetary implications are far beyond what we could manage, I think then in June we consider and see what we can do from there. That said, I'm a little bit wary of putting ourselves into a corner there where we don't have any option for the next. So do we have a fallback option if we go down one road and then decide after seeing budgetary implications that we really need to reassess?
Well, we have a few applicants for the position as it stands right now. They haven't withdrawn, so I think there are people that probably are just interested in that position. The other thing is we could always continue to ask Lindsay to come back for another year. That would be ideal.
Let her be.
But I think we could have a fallback.
Sorry, I'll have a reputation by the end of this meeting. I want to remind board members as well that we still do not have negotiated settlement with our teachers. That is unbudgeted money at this point.
I understand that. Yeah. When we were in touch with this, how much do you think we could cover with offsets that potential savings are?
Question on the spot.
Well, that's
I could
okay.
work
If
with
you want to
Jamie a
answer
little
that
bit.
later, then answer that.
I could work with
I
my
think-
neighbor.
No, I think we need time to look at that. But I don't think it's not prudent for us to throw numbers around without sitting down, looking at actual hires and possibly looking at folks who may be interested. I'm not gonna throw in numbers out.
I think we will have a better idea after we approve our hires tonight. Of what we have left in our over 100 new hires.
Does anyone have any other thoughts?
So are we recommending that we,
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
We'd like
so-
to recommend that Sean goes back to work with Jamie on what a budget could look like. I'm wondering too if we should we consider also even the possibility of just a quick special meeting to determine whether or not those results are within the bounds of what we would want to consider?
We'll also, that would be a good idea on another front, because we'll have 2 other hires to approve between now and the next board meeting.
You're at the board meeting, the dressing room is pretty late though.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused. I'm thinking that, Sean, in order for us to answer some of the questions we've said, we want to post an anticipated vacancy. Is that something that we want, at least the nod from the board this evening, to do? Or do we likewise wait for another date in a
No,
special meeting?
you can do an anticipated position. It's not really a vacancy because it's not a position.
Okay.
We do, we have in the past done an anticipated position to see what interest is there. We've done it with all of our school districts in order to get an idea of whether it's a possibility or not. So we can do that right away if you've got a job description that the HR is okay with. We could do, an potentially anticipated position and see what the interest is.
Would it also make sense to look at different levels of FTE?
Well, we can do
0.75?
that once we get a chance to look at the numbers. We can do that.
It's in the budget now? Or that just,
Lindsay's.
It was a .69, it was done as a non-union position. I was not here when it was first initially done with Bill Hammond, I think, or prior to Bill Hammond, right way back, I don't even know. The wage, as stated, is $29.25 per hour. It had a special level of benefits, even though it wasn't up around the same non-union, because it's a one-off, it was a one-off position, right? So.
my point, there's budget there.
There's
Again,
money there,
to what Neil
yes.
said, I mean, people, the town used to, like, what,
Yeah.
we're
There's
budgeting.
money there, and depending on what the level of interest might be, and we never tell the principals how to hire, but if you hire around a BA1 level, that wage is only $2 away from it. So, there is money there, it's just a matter of the FTE would grow, so we need to look at the savings that he may have already had from the new hires that have been made.
My point is, it's not like we're making a decision to cut the program, it's the fact that we have budget, it's just that we're asking for maybe more budget.
Expanded,
Because I
right.
think to Neil's point, I mean, the town doesn't really seem to be understanding what's going on at the state level, but it's like keeping just me personally awake at night, it's really bad, with just that bad, so. This is gonna be something where everyone has to go over to those guys and say, hey, we need to change our zoning laws, we need to, there's a lot of bigger things this town needs to do to be able to make big decisions like this, so.
I think there's a path forward. I think it would be helpful if you're all right with us maybe putting out an anticipated position, and then let's look at what the level of interest is and see if that's sustainable with what you already have available. Keeping in mind that we don't have an agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's plan out, not for the G meeting, but for soon, maybe 2 weeks. Okay. Did anyone, we did have questions. Does anyone else have any comments or questions at this point? Okay. Thank you. Well,
I think Lindsay.
One thing that goes into the, the discussion is that part of the reason the committee, of which I am a bystander, is seeking to increase the time is because they would like to be able to attract, as people have said, a qualified candidate, but who can really devote themselves to the program, which requires, in order to meet the needs of the teachers and the students, you have to be really incredibly flexible. And so my position was really a part-time position, but thanks to the good graces of my husband, for the record, I was able to be here when I was needed, and not everybody can do that. And that was part of the reasoning behind thinking that, this really needs to be a sustainable position for someone to walk into. And so that's part of the need. It's not just to maintain, but first of all, to grow, but to make it, something that somebody could live with. And in doing that, it would also make it grow, and in doing that, it would really, really enhance it and take it to a level that I think, would just be fantastic. So,
Thank you. We do have one hand up online too, Stephanie. So Stephanie, I guess I have to promote your hands. Go ahead.
So this is just a comment as a parent, Stephanie Hamilton, Hawk Pine Road. I think this is an awesome idea. I understand money and logistics are a problem, but my 3 kids have gotten so much out of the LEAP program and Lindsay, and I just, it to me sounds like a fantastic idea. I think right now we're probably getting way more than part-time out of Lindsay. So my concern is if it goes to that the program will diminish and not grow. So as a parent, I think it's wonderful. And I understand the weighted study and money is an issue. If it could happen, I think a lot of parents would support it. Just to echo one thing Becky said, we're relatively new here, like 3 years. And one of the things we really liked about MCS was the connection to outdoors, the outdoor learning, the LEAP program.
Thank you, Stephanie. Are there any other questions at this point in time? All right, so within a couple of weeks, we'll be back in touch on.
We'll post an anticipated potential position.
My only concern is that if we look at the budget and see that it's potentially possible, not at 1.5, maybe at 1.75 makes more sense. Is there a way that can be posted as a
Yeah, with a range.
anticipated with a range? Right, we think that might make a little more sense. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Lindsay, for your years of service here. My children did benefit, as you know. So I appreciate that on a personal level. But I think I'm speaking for all of us when I can say how much you know, to the whole community and your opinions. But you gotta check it. And to the rest of you, if you're heading out now too, I'd also like to extend my thanks for Teacher Appreciation Week too. So thank you for all you've done. And thank you for taking us through the home stretch here to the end of the year and the 6th grade celebration. Thank you all. Thanks for coming out tonight. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
I thought they were here for you, Rep.
Or special ed.
Federal funding. Federal funding, yes. Oh, I see it. You're up, Red, yes.
So I realize that there's not a document in board docs of the LEA plan. So every year, the federal government issues grant funds to the states, who then issue those to the local school districts. And so part of our application process every year to the Vermont Agency of Education includes this local education agency plan, which in short is a school district assuring that we're abiding by special ed policies, that we're hiring certified educators, that we're meeting the needs of students with disabilities. And so each year, part of our application packet is this document which details those assurances, asks for the signature of the superintendent and the school board chair. And so I'm happy to field questions about it, go into more detail if people want that. The other piece that I'm talking about is related to the IDEA-B grant. And that's the addition of a new proposed policy, which brings both the state of Vermont in compliance with federal expectations and, in doing so, our school district. So I just want to talk about the policy real quick because that's a component of the assurances in the LEA plan. My understanding is that the Vermont Agency of Education and the Vermont School Boards Association worked to develop this model policy and put together the document, which is in board docs, called the Policy and Procedure Manual. The Vermont Special Education Procedures and Practice Manual. And so what this does is basically reiterate what the special education regulations are, because that's a requirement that the state has for school districts to have available. It's a lengthy document. And if you just look at the table of contents on page 3, as I mentioned, it pretty much goes through all the requirements that the state regulations require of school districts. And we're saying, yes, we do these, we follow the law. By adopting the policy, it allows us to have this manual, which is shared by multiple school districts, except the name is different. Ours says the Norwich School District. And it allows the Vermont Agency of Education to make updates to the manual to realign with any changes in regulations without another policy going to the school. Just a little bit of information about how we've used the IDEA grant funds in the past. For as long as I've been here, which is about 10 years, the majority of our funding that we use is to fund about 0.8 of our speech language pathologist position and about half an FTE of one of our special education teachers. Some years there's a little extra, and we've used that for professional development or updating our assessment materials or instructional supplies, reading books, things like that. So the intention is to continue to use the funds this coming year for those staff positions. Any questions?
With this policy manual,
yes.
Just tell us if there are any significant changes or additions with this rule.
So there are some projected rule changes in special education. I don't believe they've been approved yet. There's been some back and forth between the field and the agency about seeking a delay. And those are regarding how we determine eligibility for students with specific learning disabilities. Currently, there's a severe discrepancy model which looks at the child's cognitive ability and where they're performing academically. And if the mathematical calculation says there's a big enough discrepancy, they have a learning disability. If that's too small of a discrepancy, they don't. And so the state of Vermont is proposing that we move to a different model, which puts it in line with most, if not all, of the other states, looking at more of a pattern of strengths and weaknesses, which allows for more of a team deliberation and not calculation. And the other change is regarding how we determine the adverse effect that a disability has on a child's performance. Right now, there's another very kind of calculated process that requires teams to look at basic skill areas, and the child has to be performing the lowest 15th percentile on a number of different measures. And so again, that kind of dissects a child down into a percentage. And so the change would be more of a team discussion about what is the adverse effect. Is it significant enough to impact their learning? And if so, what do they require? And so the discussion for teams will really be around what does that child need resulting from their disability. Their needs may be met through an intervention model or additional supports, or they may need, that higher intensity special education intervention. So the details in this procedure manual don't detail any of that specific of a detail. So I don't believe there'll be changes to this when those rules are approved or signed.
When will those be determined?
I think at this point they're scheduled to go into effect on July 1, but I think there's still requests out there from the field to delay. I don't know if there's been a for sure final answer. But I can check on that after the meeting and provide an update.
And how is that going to align us with the rules across the board?
It would be pretty similar to how New Hampshire determines special education eligibility. Even though Marion Cross and the Ray School have had different state rules governing how we determine eligibility, the percent of students with disabilities in Marion Cross and the Ray School are pretty comparable. They tend to be around 13%. So I don't see a significant change in the number of students being eligible. But we also have interventions going into place. We're adding a math coach and other changes within the school that allow us to kind of enhance our tiers of intervention, and the changing in special ed funding. It's another piece that allows more flexibility in how we use those funds.
Questions for that?
It's hard to follow a discussion of an outdoor education, environmental, exciting teacher but it's funding, so we will take it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that come up.
And I can sign this and get to here.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ross. Thanks for, sorry.
Yeah, no, Tom, I don't know, it might be a question for both of you, but I saw that we have a policy, it's proposed, and it was read on November 3rd, and I just wasn't sure why we didn't do a second reading or pass it or what's going on.
We had been holding off until
this
came out with it.
Okay.
So it was, the policy originally came out, but the state hadn't
Right, the
provided
manual
the
was
manual.
now.
And so
Okay.
now that that's out, and a number of school districts in our region worked with a special education attorney to look at the policy, and a couple tweaks were made to ensure that it's appropriate for the school districts.
So are the tweaks reflected in what we have in board docs now, or do we need
Yes.
to tweak them?
This is the policy that was
Okay.
proposed
That
and
was
updated.
Okay.
Maybe tweaked wasn't the best term. Updated and is an appropriate
Okay,
proposed policy.
thank you.
Okay, no other questions, I don't see any online, so let's move down our list, and next up is the Childcare, Norwich Town's Childcare Committee final report, and I know we have a special guest with us today. Welcome, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for chairing this committee. It's always good to see you. How did you referenced Neil was going to lead, and then you were going to step in? Or how did you want that to work?
Can I tee it up, or
Yeah, please do.
Well, there, so as the board may recall, several months ago, the town of Norwich spun up a childcare committee. They asked for one representative of the school board to sit on that committee. That was me. Rebecca was on the committee as well too, and she was duly elected the chair of the committee, I think right at the very first meeting. We were very happy for that, and she led us through the entire process. The town, and so quickly just to remind folks, the charge from the town was for this committee to evaluate whether or not childcare support should be considered to be considered to be funded municipally through town budget money, but in addition to develop, I guess, opportunities or strategies for the select board to consider when engaging in childcare. I just want to say that I thought that the committee, and Rebecca can go into the details of who was on there, the committee worked really well together. It was I had a very positive experience in the collaboration work. And I thought that the final report had a lot of great information in there. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I encourage you at least you go through the executive session and just see the main things that came out of it. But maybe with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Rebecca just to give a brief overview of maybe the findings and the key points that you might want school board members to walk away with from the report.
Neil, if you told me, I would have brought my PowerPoint.
The reason I didn't tell you that we want the PowerPoint because the chair asked that we limit the.
Okay, well, I'll be very quick then. First of all, it was a pleasure to serve on this committee, and I will remind everybody that school districts are also municipalities, but when we're talking about the municipal responsibility, in this case, it was the select board. But this is one of those places where actually the responsibility of the school district overlaps with the community. As it does in special education, your budgets, or state budgets for education help fund special education services for kids who are pre-K aged as well. At the beginning, I think the committee came together because we realized that we have a child care crisis in this town. Parents can't afford child care. It costs up to $25,000 a year, as much as college, for an infant. If you can find a spot, and there really are almost no infant spots in place. If we had paid leave, that would cut the demand in half, but we don't have paid leave, so really there is no place for a newborn child to go. And the same is true of toddlers, the same is true of others. There's some interesting data that I hope you look at, because I think you will see in this space, childcare, we look specifically at ages 0 to 5. We also should look at 0 to 8 because they're older children who need care after school. But if you look at the data, and even just the data in Norwich and the Vermont side of the river and the New Hampshire side of the river, you can begin to see how different policy decisions at the state level are starting to impact what it feels like on the ground. And we should come back to the weighting study, because that will come up in the context of this discussion as well. But you all know that Vermont rolled out universal pre-K vouchers. It wasn't pre-K, it's not a provision program. So no one is entitled to a pre-K spot. You have to find a spot. So in theory, even if you are a parent and you have that voucher behind you, you have to find a pre-K spot to get it. What we do see is that there's a lot of pre-K spots in Vermont compared to in New Hampshire. So there is some evidence that school districts in particular, and I think this district is one of them, stepped up to the plate and really began to see early education broadly as, first of all, an incredible early intervention investment, an inclusive investment that made sure every child reached school ready to learn, but also seeing that as part of the larger portfolio of education. That is not true in the context of the 0 to 3-year-olds. In fact, if you look at the data that's in the report, you'll see that as we rolled out pre-K and subsidies for the youngest children, the 3 to 5-year-olds, the older children, we actually lost capacity for the 0 to 3-year-olds. So one of the unintended consequences of Vermont's pre-K law is that we broke the business model for many of the child care providers in this area. And if you look at Norwich and the Vermont side of the river, there are no family providers left. They cannot, and some of the providers that we surveyed spoke to us about that problem. When school districts pull in pre-K students, or when center-based cares, they tend to be the other ones that pull in these pre-K students, pull them in, the private providers and the providers of children 0 to 3 can no longer cross-subsidize those younger children who are much more expensive to serve, so they tend to close. And when you think about who is most adversely impacted by that, that is going to be the less wealthy families in the state. They tend to be the ones who support that. And so I think that's a way to introduce the idea that it seems easy to solve problems, just spend more money. But we have evidence that if you just spend more money without thinking about what you're doing, you may actually undermine your own goal, because that is what happened. And so I think that was a key finding for this committee, and I think we all came in determined to find the solution for Norwich families, and we all came away saying, oh my, this is going to be harder to get to than we want, and it's not going to be something this district can do by itself. It's going to have to be a regional or even a state and a federal solution at some point. But that moving without thinking about the impact on other arenas, other sectors, is going to have adverse consequences. We start out by saying that there's no way to solve this problem without money. You can't compensate for the fact that it costs $25,000 to educate and take care of an infant or a toddler. Most of that cost is actually going to staff already, and they're not even making a living wage in many cases. And so the problem is you cannot fix the sector without a significant investment in money, but if you don't make the investment the right way, you're going to hurt the sector even more. Another place that manifested is that these teachers in these programs, they're dedicated professionals, they're making incredible sacrifices. Many of them have invested their own resources in professional development and education to care for our children well. They can't make a living wage. And many of them found that during the pandemic, they could actually make a much better wage working as a nanny for a family. And if you think about it, as a parent, if you can hire someone for $50,000 and you have, when they would normally make $20,000, $25,000, and you have 3 kids, you've saved money and you've changed that teacher's life. That's how broken this market is. This market is so broken. And I think it's important to emphasize that, because we need to remember that childcare is not a public good in this state. It is a private good. No one is entitled to childcare in state laws at the current moment. It's not like public education. When a child enrolls in this district and asks to go to kindergarten, we say, of course. And if it's tight, Sean, you're going to find a way to get that kindergartner into the building. If a child comes to your preschool, you can turn them away if there's not enough capacity. That is a very fundamental difference. So again, unless we're grappling with the reality of public goods versus private goods, this is not a problem that we can solve. And it's not clear it's one that we can solve here. And it is also clear that if we did solve it here by providing it for all of our own children, we would probably collapse childcare for most of the surrounding towns. So that's just a reality. We need to be thinking about that and being very intentional. Which brings us to the waiting study. We are a town that is going to be adversely affected by that waiting study, because we are actually one of the most prosperous towns, the best compensated towns in the nation, in the state. Our families are better compensated. We do not have the significant disadvantage that many districts in the state do. The state of Vermont has seen significant costs of shifting of social services into education school budgets. So you can give the same amount of money to a district with a tremendous amount of poverty as you give to a child here. It looks like we're spending the same amount of money on paper. The reality is, if a district is serving a lot of kids who are economically disadvantaged, a significant portion of every dollar goes to essential social services that, frankly, we don't have the demand for in our community. That's why the waiting study went through. That's one way to solve poverty. You can try to have schools solve all the problems of poverty. That fund is supposed to compensate for the effects of lack of affordable housing, lack of access to social services, lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to mental health support. That is what those communities are getting a better tax capacity to support. Which brings us back to Norwich. I don't believe personally that you can solve all the problems of inequality by funding schools. Well, I love you, Sean, you're amazing. But schools need help. They need communities to help. And on the one hand, we have to help other communities make housing affordable so that their families aren't so financially taxed and the parents have time and resources to take care of their own children. But in this community, another option for us is to think about our own responsibility for affordable housing. We will be penalized under this penalty, this formula, because we do not have affordable housing in this town. That's the reality. Do we also have a responsibility to make sure that families can have affordable housing in our own town? so that we can share the responsibility for making communities where families live. That would also benefit us in our tax formula, but it would also make our community a more inclusive community that represents the state and represents the types of families that we will need to be here to make this a vibrant community. So I think that's the highlights. Neil, is there, what did I miss?
No, I think that you hit all of them. Yeah. And maybe just briefly, the select board's response to the report.
There hasn't, I think there is a lot of regional collaboration going on in terms of whether there are ways to move regionally around creating capacity. Again, I think this notion that if we try to solve this unilaterally in Norwich, we're going to have an adverse impact, not just on our neighboring communities in Vermont, but even across the river, I think resonated. And so people are trying to think about ways that they can work regionally and perhaps have a regional conversation, not just with each other, but also perhaps with our elected representatives. This is an issue that needs to be addressed at a higher level as well. And I'm hoping those conversations will continue. Yeah,
you know, I think one of the things that the committee talked about a lot was, you know, are there things, if you know, understanding that it's the system is underfunded, right? Are there other things that we could do that would decrease the burden of funding, right? So that you might not make the thing so big. And we said, yes, there are, but none of them that move the needle enough to actually make up for that lack of funding. And so you walk away from that knowing that, you know, there, I mean, the system as it exists now is just, it's not working. But yeah, you know, to the extent that, you know, it requires more effort than just the town of Norwich.
There's one other piece that I think really has come out since the committee ended our work. We ended our work and submitted our proposal, our report to the select board so that they could consider it before town meeting. The other issue that has been developing, and it's certainly a hot issue in the K-12 space during the recent legislative session, it still isn't over, is this issue around whether when you pay vouchers to private settings, you can take it to an institution that discriminates. And there are childcares in the state, just as there are K-12 schools that are openly discriminatory in their practices that do accept state money. And that is an undecided case because it particularly in the context of certain schools, I won't get into the long and short of it, but that issue which applies at K-12 also applies at the 0 to 5 level when you're talking about taking public investments and putting them into private sectors. It's different, it's very different when you contract. So if I went to the Lisa nursery school and said, Lisa, I have a child who I think is showing some signs that they may have some need for early intervention services. I'm going to contract with you. I'm going to give you $20,000 to open up a new preschool classroom that will serve all the children from my town. That's a contracting relationship. That is a fundamentally different relationship than town of Norwich will cut a check to any childcare that enrolls a parent from the town of Norwich, where the school district is not actually contracting, procuring a specific relationship for a specific public purpose. That's the difference between contracting and the vouchers, the way we currently operate them. So when you choose to voucher, you give up, say, over the democratic use of those vouchers. And that is being litigated right now at the Supreme Court. When that decision comes down, I think the state of Vermont is going to have some big decisions to make, both in the context of childcare, but also in the context of public education as well.
So I might just follow up all that with, so hopefully you don't walk away with this like extremely pessimistic view of the problem and inability to solve it, right? I think one of the things you need to look at as well, Norwich as a town may not be able to solve the problem. I think you need to look at, you know, what can Norwich do though to try to effect a solution. And I think one of the things that you probably want to consider and turn to is the advocacy piece, right? We're working in collaboration with legislators or the legislature, right, in trying to move the needle on certain things that would help address the issue. And so you're looking at things from that point of view, I think sometimes useful.
And to just add to, and we know it doesn't work, right? We have to figure out how to reunite 0 to 3-year-olds with 3 to 5-year-olds. That has to happen. I know this isn't going to work. We know that there are places where we have, we talked about this. Some of the most successful models we've seen have been in other places where there's been excess capacity in public buildings, municipal buildings. You can contract with a provider to provide that care in the building. It's not enough, but it gets you a lot closer to being able to raise wages. And we looked at an example where a school district that had seen a population drop was able to turn over an old elementary building and run a childcare center for 0 to 5-year-olds and push pre-K into it. It's very inspiring that they were able to raise the salaries of all the teachers by $2 to $3, which is a lot. When we're earning $15 or $17 an hour, that's a lot. So there are examples. We don't currently have that problem of extra space, so that's not really an option for this community, but there are other communities in the market.
Did I see a question?
Yeah, I think I'm feeling pessimistic, and I'm feeling the need to take some action. And so I know that advocacy is a huge piece, and I'm wondering, like, with paternal leave, is that a place where we, like, pushing that lever, is that a good lever to push? Because then theoretically, each parent, if it's a two-parent family, gets 6 months, and that takes care of the first year.
That's in the report. And
yeah,
I hope you
so I just want to be like, I just am kind of
yes.
like wondering, like, which ones give the biggest bang for the buck without having to, find a place that has capacity to put 0 to 5 in, like, which would take much longer. I'm looking for
that.
Yeah.
It's the hardest, and it's just math, right?
Right. It's all math.
The ratio.
All of it's math.
It's all of it's math. It's the ratios. You have
Yeah.
to have a much smaller ratio to take care of infants because they can't take care of themselves and they can't advocate. So the more you can cover that first year of life, the easier that lift is. And we know that exactly, the shortage of space is most acute for infants, and you'll see that in the report. There are really almost no infants left. If you could take care of the first half year of life, first of all, that would hit everybody, so you'd sidestep this whole issue of pitting communities against communities, which is what's so toxic right now.
Right.
And that would be something that would benefit all of young families. And the other thing that we do is it would basically half the demand for slots in that window. And it's a good family investment. We know that when parents aren't stressed and can raise their kids, they show up at school better ready to learn. This is all connected. Right? Yeah. And that's a very high leverage issue.
So I'm going to come at this from the perspective of having 3 kids who attended 6 preschools in 3 states over 9 years and have dropped, I think, about $200,000 in our education, which I read this report this afternoon and I wondered why it happened. I can tell that you're passionate about preschool and finding care and ways to do care, but this has been a problem forever, not Norwich. It's specific to at least Cambridge, Massachusetts, San Francisco, and Norwich. And I think that you guys really delved into this 0 to 5 program, but I think you sort of missed the low-hanging fruit that was in front of you of looking at those children once they hit pre-K. Where do they go at 3 p.m.? Now you also, and summer camp, because there are really no summer camps in the area that can take those pre-K children. Now, the Childcare Center in Norwich runs year-round, so if you can get your child in there, they're in care from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., except for, I think, 2 weeks a year.
So I don't think we ducked it. We actually did talk about that, and one of the recommendations we made to the select board that a good follow-on for another committee, because we ran out of time for our mandate. And one of the things that we put as a follow-on was to explore in greater depth what those options were for aftercare and summer learning. That is also a very volatile policy space in the state of Vermont, and we just made a decision to treat, used to be much of the after-school programming and summer programming actually came through school districts. There is now a decision that just moved a lot of that out of the Agency of Education. Now it's running through a nonprofit, and it's a statewide nonprofit-led initiative. So it's going to be it's actually also going to come under the same issue with the Supreme Court case that I was talking about. The state of Vermont has had a preference for privatizing, and the question is, when you do that, how do you make sure you're directing it at the specific needs that you need to target? the families who work who need that care till 6 days.
Well,
Because
right now we have
part-time is
direct
not enough.
departments, right?
That was the group that we did. We spent a lot of time talking to the rec department. We spent time talking
The
to,
rec department is one person.
and we talked to the library, and they talked to us about
We don't
what they,
allow people under fourth grade to hang out.
but they're working on a
Yeah, so
proposal.
just,
Yeah,
what I want to
Yeah.
add is,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
other pieces of this that this study didn't address, in large part, because the charge from the select board didn't include that.
The charge from the select board didn't include engagement, did it? That was what the committee decided.
no, we did what we could. I mean, it was with respect. I mean, I cannot say enough positive about the other members of the community. We had people do research grade.
Did you pass the
surveys and-
people? I
Yeah,
love
it
the
was
surveys, the
four
numbers are
people,
great to
right,
see.
5 people were.
No, I
yeah.
understand that, but their children were either very small or grown. That's high school or
I think I would strongly recommend that then this school board make a recommendation to the select board that they authorize another committee. We agree with you, this is an absolutely worthy topic.
this is
It
also
needs more
the
work.
only elementary school I've ever attended where there was no drop-in after.
And there used to be, and what happened is, I think it was in 2016, it was in 2000, no, it was maybe 2018, they changed the regulations. Schools now, if they offer aftercare, I believe they have to be regulated as both a childcare and a school district, and I'm pretty sure that's why
The
they
school
closed it.
never offered aftercare here. This was a
Liability.
No,
care
they
center.
did.
They
They
used to be here.
They did.
When my kids were here, there was
Prior to
aftercare.
15, prior to 15,
Yes.
I think it stopped in 15, right before it came, it was a liability issue.
My
So
kids were in it.
there are it's the same problem, that there's 2 different sectors, 2 different agencies, 2 sets of federal statutes, 2 sets of federal rules and regulations, 2 sets of state statutes, 2 sets of federal regulations, the state regulations. There is a serious policy gap here, and we keep tripping over our shoelaces as a state. You're absolutely right.
So given that our current aftercare is run by the rec department, does it benefit the school to work with the rec department to figure out something that's more sustainable for parents of children over the age of 3 who can out of school?
Or you could also, I mean, I think this would be a worthy follow-on study, because I think there's the rec department, there's discussion at the library, there could be a conversation with the school. Somebody actually needs to do the shovel work to figure out what those avenues and opportunities are, and then also look at how regulations have changed and what recommendations you can make as a school board, but also as a select board, to make it easier for communities to do that kind of partnership. There's some tricky issues here, and it would help you make good, smart decisions about how to advance that goal if somebody did some groundwork for you. And I would absolutely encourage you to pursue that, because I think it's a really good topic. We heard over and over again that until 3 is not enough. And I was that parent. I mean, as a working parent, who can leave work at 3 to come home to take care of the kid? So it is affecting people's choices right now, no question about it. Which of course affects their earnings, which affects a lot of things.
Rebecca, thank you so much. This conversation is happening in the context of our strategic planning process that we're just really getting deep into right now. In our subcommittee that Jamie and I began having conversations along these lines, and I would encourage Tom and your committee as well. We need to make sure we keep this in the forefront of that.
Something we embarked on my part of this.
And there are grant opportunities available through the state. A lot of its resources, capacity, having a designated, it has to have a designated staff person to make it happen. So there are issues. But then there are grants. I mean, there are grants available, but somebody has to have the capacity to write it. And again, that's something we can use.
Are you seeing momentum in any specific areas at the state level, and even at the state level? I mean, this is where my frustration comes in, because I think we not try as a minute in this regards, but it's going to become more of a national issue too. And it's like where do we even begin with this stuff? Do you see momentum in certain areas at the state level where we could advocate to get the ball rolling in some regard, and then do some building blocks from there? Because as you've noted, it is such a huge issue. It's almost hard to even begin to understand where to start, especially with this waiting study coming down, where if we're going to be paying even more in taxes, and we already don't have in place this after school
care program, which would obviously cost us more in funding, even though perhaps that can go through a town type of budget. I'm at the point where it's hard to even know where to begin to get the biggest bang from the buck and create some building blocks.
I think it's, when they passed the proposal to increase funding in investment in childcare, the due date was pushed out and it was to come up with a plan. The state doesn't know how to do this either. And so far, there's no appetite that I see yet to say, is there a different way to think about this? Which I think is going to be a stumbling block. So I don't see it yet. I think there was a lot of hope that Building Back Better would go through and that would fund the existing infrastructure. But we have a real problem. And I think you're also in a bit of a chicken and an egg situation. I mean, again, I don't know there are a lot, you've been thinking about this issue. I don't know what the best way is to get ahead of exactly the death spiral that you're talking about. I don't know that it is an affordable housing, frankly, because that would bring more revenue, it would bring more kids into the town, it would change the mix of the kids. So I don't know that that's actually not the best way to strengthen your school, to be blunt. And so I think that there's a lot of conversations around that, and part of that is also figuring out how to make this a place where people want to live. I think the other number I really look at is, and we are a little bit less vulnerable to this than some towns, is keeping an eye on what proportion of the homes in the town are second homes versus primary residences. And I got to tell you, there are communities where the majority of homes are now second homes, and there are no kids in those towns anymore because families can't live in towns where everything's second home. It's something to really keep in mind. You know, how do you make this a family community? Because that's what keeps all these institutions strong. And, I go tell them to put that committee back together, or somebody, and happy to help support. I think Neil's right, we don't know how this waiting study is gonna come down. I do, having been in many of those schools, they do not have the tax capacity to take care of their kids. I can see it. I also know that the state is not investing in mental health support for families. That means kids are showing up at school and struggling, and you can pour as much money as you want into those kids, but they go right home to a family that's still suffering. We have a lot of issues, and we have to be able to deal with that, and that is not being addressed either. So my hope is that at some point, I think school districts have a role to play in pushing back for a policy that makes us more robust and more resilient in the future. I don't think we're on the right path right now. And I say that knowing how much some communities struggle to even raise the basics. And I know you've seen this in other places. And we're lucky. We're lucky.
So, I would just thank you for all this work. And again, I've been with all this ranks, and what I would encourage you to look too, because obviously we're all looking at the state of Vermont to help and what we should be doing this, but I would also encourage all of you guys just to go pull up some income tax data in the state of Vermont. I've been shocked, right? I mean, there are literally 600 state filers that make over $1 million in the state of Vermont. That's like a fraction of Cambridge, right? Like just the cities. We're talking like, I think it's like 4% of our taxpayers pay like 50% of our income tax. So the state of Vermont is trying to do all these things, and there's a point when you can't like do that on backs of you. So it's going to go into the waiting study, but anyway, I hear it. Like, it's great to think that we should be providing services from zero all the way through, but there's also like.
We also have to ask hard questions. I mean, and I'm going to push back on this because I noticed that when they passed that bill and when they studied it, they chose not to look at the districts that pay vouchers at all. So when this district spends above the excess spending penalty threshold, we pay a penalty for that. I get it, fair enough. But when a district that doesn't operate public schools spends above that excess spending penalty threshold, they don't get a penalty. So we've set up a system that privileges districts that don't operate public schools. And that might have made sense back in the old days before we had school buses, paved roads, and snowplows. But we're in a different world right now. And so I think that there has to be a conversation about that because we're setting up some pretty perverse incentives.
Can you say that, sorry, can you say that again, because I missed
The
that?
districts that do not operate public schools are exempted from the excess spending penalty threshold. So if we spend too much per pupil, we hit a penalty.
But what districts don't operate public schools?
No, they operate the elementary level, but places like Stratton, a bunch of, up in the Northeast Kingdom, but there are a bunch of towns that have chosen not to close their schools. Yeah, they can send it.
So their tuition, so there is no public, in this sense, there is no public high school in town. So the arrangement is then that those taxpayer dollars can be used to send those kids to private schools.
Or in Winhall, where they chose to close their elementary school too. They don't have any public schools and they send it elsewhere. The other challenge that we have is that the excess spending threshold, the average denounced tuition, which is the average cost of educating kids, is the base for setting tuition. So the size of the voucher we pay to, say, Phillips Exeter Academy, when a district sends a kid to Phillips Exeter Academy, is set to the average tuition for the state. Your board, you know what happens when your tax capacity increases. All these districts that have been starving their kids for years, they finally have the money to actually buy things that kids need. We're going to be spending an awful lot more. And you know the Ed Fund is self-balancing. That means that added cost is shared statewide, number one. And number two, the average now's tuition is going to go up. So now, while we're squeezing some towns in Vermont, we're still letting the average kid who takes a tuition voucher to Phillips Exeter be overfunded. Because we're basing weights on what we think it takes to educate a kid. But that's not how we're basing the vouchers. And so we're setting up a system that is going to set some very, very perverse incentives in play. And there's been no discussion of that. And I think when this starts to play out, it's going to be a pretty volatile political environment in the next couple of years as well. And I haven't heard anyone in those committees address that issue. You've been following more Hawkeye than I have, though. So it's systems, as you were talking about. When you set in place a perverse incentive, it may take a couple of years to materialize, but it's not a coincidence that the districts that don't have any public schools are overrepresented. Alongside us, I will say, that are overrepresented in the highest spending districts in the state. And it's because they don't have that penalty or that incentive to ask, are we spending these state dollars, because they are state dollars, in the way that gets the biggest value for every kid who needs it? And I don't think we're having that conversation. Happy to talk your ear off on this stuff. I'm passionate, and I'm so grateful to this district for what you did for my kids. And thank you so much.
Thank you for all you put into this
thanks
committee,
for
for
that,
chairing the committee. Thanks to Neil for serving on the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Anytime. Yep.
Yeah, thanks so much.
That excludes our agenda, and so next up is our waiting study updates. So, we have actually, do you want to go back and talk about some of the exchanges we had with Jim Madison? Some of the confusion over what may be coming down in terms of the base enrollment. I mean, I guess to tee it up, it's moving through, and it looks like it's just a matter of time before the waiting study is really in the same format that was recommended consent to the House. One thing that may be a little bit weird, I think we've already talked about this, which is that there's a limit on the amount that the increase in tax can be year can be set at the high level of 5%. So this 20% that we've been talking about actually over the course of 4 years, not beginning in next fiscal year 3, but fiscal year 4. Reading into that, Neil, we got into had some questions, which I would have as well. It's very confusing the way the language is written, so much so that Brad James in the Agency of Education is providing some description and background on how these 5% increments are going to have to be considered. I'm still confused. We haven't read what you sent back, so did you?
So I talked to Brad today.
Yeah, okay.
In a sense, tried to decipher the language in the bill and understand what it means as far as when we're going to actually apply it. So this is my understanding as of tonight, could change. But so right now you're looking at a 5-year phase-in period beginning in FY25. In FY25, the tax rate, not education spending, the tax rate before the application of the CLA will be compared against the tax rate using the new model from FY24. So if that increase in the tax rate is greater than 5%, then our tax rate will get capped at a 5% increase. In that, and it's important because if in that first year, if you don't exceed the 5% cap in the first year, then every subsequent year it doesn't apply. So if you don't trip it in year 1, then you're not going to trip it any year after that. So in year 1, let's say, just because of how the budget's worked out and everything like that, our proposed increase was 4%. We wouldn't trip the cap. And if year 2, that increase was 20%, you get all 20% in year 2. So you have to trip it in year 1 in order for it to be available to you in the subsequent years. There is another provision in there, though, that if in that first year your increase is more than 10%, a commission is going to take a look at your budget and try to essentially figure out whether or not you're gaming the system. If you artificially inflated, not artificially, if you inflated your budget to take advantage of the 5% cap, then there's the secretary springs up the commission that includes, I think, like 3 business administrators and 3 superintendents, and they go over your budget to try to figure out whether or not you're spending, if what you did was intentional or not. My gut says is that because of our status in the interstate school district, that the amount of the budget that's going to go, that comes from Dresden to apply to us is going to cause us to not, this is just real speculative, right? I would say that we would probably be exempt from that review. Like we could still have 10% increase, right? I think that you either be exempt from the review, or the review would show that if the reason that we were that high was because of the Dresden portion of the budget, that we would be okay. I'm not certain that there's an actual punishment if you're 10% over and they find that you have done that on purpose. I didn't talk with Brad about that, didn't understand it. The other piece that caught my eye, though, and related to the 5% increase, is that if y'all might recall, when we go into town meeting, we only have estimates. We don't know what the actual tax rate's going to be at that point in time, because what needs to happen is all of these budgets all across Vermont need to pass so that we know how much the education spend is going to be. The legislature takes a look at that, they run some numbers, figure out what the yield number is going to be. And when those things are finally set, then you know what your tax rate's going to be. And then at that point, you know how much it went up from the previous year. But you don't know that at town meeting. Voters don't know that when they approve the budget. You find out sometime later. The issue that I could foresee happening is that Norwich goes into town meeting. We're trying to be very conservative with our budget because we're worried about, what taxpayers might be able to afford and stuff like that. So we're very careful, and we're going in right at the line. We're saying that this tax rate increase looks like it could be 5.25%. Yet what happens is the tax rate that gets compared for purposes of whether or not you're going to trip this thing is that the actual tax rate that happens, the one that shows up in your tax bill in July, right? Invariably, what we've seen over the past few years is the number that we give folks at town meeting actually comes down. And so I worry you could go into town meeting saying we think it's going to be 5.25%, to find out that afterwards it actually came down and is now under 5%. We've not tripped the threshold to cap it at 5%, which means then in those successive out years, there is no cap for us. So I think that this could be
It's a math
there's
problem.
gonna be a lot of analysis that's gonna need to happen during the budgeting. And some of the numbers that we're gonna need for the modeling, when I talked to Brad today, I would anticipate we would see numbers that we can use for modeling available late summer. So there. So that's what I know at this moment in time. This is likely to pass. I think as is, my best guess is that knowing how quickly they want to get this legislative session over, that what's sitting what is been approved by the House, that the Senate will probably just concur with without any changes, and it'll be history. So I think we're in for a bit of a ride from here on out. And, associated with that, and I had mentioned this to Tom, I think what we really ought to be looking at doing, and I use this term with Tom, maybe come up with a better term, is just scheduling a series of community listening sessions at the point in time where we've got model data that's available to us, so we can better estimate what the tax rate increases might look like. We need to have a conversation with town and find out what does this town want us to do, right? What are the values? Do we want to try like hell to limit the tax rate increase, knowing that budget cuts might be required to do? Like, I personally don't have a good sense as to where this town wants us to go with this. And I think having those listening sessions where we can get a little bit of data, some modeling data, and then the rest of the time, I just want to hear what folks have to say about this. Because right now, I personally have no idea which way to go.
You said Brad's timeline is summer, so
he was anticipating having some modeling data using FY23 numbers later this summer.
It would be after June. We have to send in all of our ratified budgets by 15. So if I come out, I would imagine August. I got an update today too. Probably August or September.
Mm-hmm. And so the CLA is taking another factor.
Yes, so the tax rate increase will be calculated pre-application of the CLA.
Did you have a question?
Sorry.
Did you have?
I was just thinking, so do we think that we should, kind of to your point about the community, do we think that our town manager, select board, planning commission is aware of what's going on, and should someone at least make them aware of this? Because I think to Rebecca's point with the homestead, just so everyone's aware, I've done some, you can look at the beauty about us not having a revaluation in town is you can look at Jamie's reports and you can see what our homestead and non-residential rates are. And our homestead has gone down and our non-residential rates have gone up, roughly about 10%, okay? And then the irony is because the non-residential tax rate is, and again, these numbers change, Jamie, but last year, just so everyone's aware, the non-residential tax rate, even after applying the CLA, was 17%, I think, lower than the residential tax rate for non-homestead, which would have resulted in like another $1 million if we were all being taxed at the same rate for our little town here, which is about 7% of our budget, school budget, right? So the town, I think, also needs to, the fact that our entire grant list has only gone up about 150,000 total, right? Because we haven't done any revaluation. So the grant list, the fact that it has only gone up 150,000 in 5 years means that nothing's happened. We haven't had any building in town, and that anything that's been transacted has been to non-residents. So we're basically subsidizing non-residents in a town that has a housing situation, housing cost situation, housing count situation, that place for people. It's insanity. So I think the question is, and this is easy, not, I mean, Neil, I think says this too, like it's not that hard to fix by changing some zoning and allowing few more houses to, but it increases our tax base. And I say this every year, because every year we're up, a budget that goes up, we only increase our budget by like 2-3%, like, that's like less than healthcare, and the reason we have to do that is because we're not adding any more, our tax base is the same. We're calculating this on you, costs keep going up, so if we're not bringing in, I'm not saying we have to have Walmart on the corner, but like, we need
The Trader Joe's would be
a
okay.
little bit more tax base to help to everything grow, right? There's one way out of this, and that's.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I do think, they're hearings, but it would also probably make sense to do it, going to a separate meeting, because that might get the word out a little bit further.
I'm happy to go with people, with someone to do that, or just to make sure that people know what's going on. We only had, I mean, you guys, we did this great presentation, you put together my color thing. And I think we had, what, 10 people on the line?
Yeah.
It was like, okay, we'll just like, oh, that's good.
I think, and going to a PTO meeting makes a lot of sense too. I mean, they're a pretty active local group and to the staff even, like the teaching staff. I know not many of them are Norwich residents, but they also talk to parents and can make them aware of what's going on. I don't know, I just, and then I'm thinking about Rebecca's point of like, once this goes into practice, the districts that haven't had money, they're justifiably going to start spending a lot of money. And just the ripple, I just, like the ripple effect of all of this is, yeah, it's scary, and it's easy we're a wealthy, well-educated community, and it's very easy for people to just go across the river. It's not that hard to move.
No.
A half mile. More than here.
It is. I will say, the other thing that worries me too is that I think that this change, it missed the mark on one of the things that we wanted to address, and that was making the funding model more understandable.
Yes.
It's actually gotten even more complicated, because what I didn't, reveal was that this whole, so the equalized pupil calculation is being changed, and it's now going to be based off of ADM. And so this whole, it's just, we have a system that, like I told you guys, like, it's taken me 8+ years to get to the level of understanding that I have now. And there's still stuff that I don't understand about it. So how in the hell would you expect a normal taxpayer to be able to make sense of any of this? It's impossible. And when you do that, then I think, everybody loses in that respect. If you can't explain the system, then some part of it, I think, is broken.
Well, that is built into the isn't it? That was going to be established.
So I believe that there is an I believe that there's an established committee to look at whether or not we should switch to an income-based funding model. I'm not convinced that would turn things simple. And then there would also be a required committee to take a look at recalculating or recomputing the weights on a regular basis. So not only were your people numbers, but they could be changing in a not so predictable fashion if things get readjusted every so many years. So it makes budgeting hard. It makes explaining it to people hard. Maybe I'm done. Maybe.
Oh, no.
No. Sorry, I'm just thinking, I gotta stop thinking out loud. I'm done. I'm done. No, I'm not. No, and I don't know. To editorialize for a second, at least Vermont is trying.
Yes.
Right? We may not be doing it, we may not be hitting the mark. We may not be, just dialing it in like right where it needs to be. But damn, New Hampshire is doing absolutely nothing. And some of the other stuff that's going on with our colleagues on the other side of the river just is mind-boggling to me. And so, yes, this whole thing is pessimistic, but, you know, at the end of the night, I maybe will pat myself on the back a little bit as I have a beer and say, at least we're trying.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
We're gonna end up.
But
I know.
to build on that, I think the more people that we can get to appreciate and write to these, because who's to say that as this is implemented, that you can't find more revenue sources to fund it maybe? Again, that's why I bring up this homestead idea. I mean, trust me, every time I walk my dog, I'm like, how can we do this, right? Like, instead of cannabis, like, I mean, there's all these different revenue sources where you could at least make, you know, it add to the pot, but more than just moving money around, right? And the non-residential thing to me is like, what are we doing in the state where we're basically subsidizing non-residents? Maybe I don't understand it all. I'm sure there's going to be some good stuff.
I think it's a historical anomaly because it used to be the goal was to have a stable rate for the non-homestead, so you can have a stable rate for business planning purposes. In most towns, it is higher than those rates.
That's the answer I get from everybody, but I'm like, it's not that anymore, and maybe we have a greater than or equal to. I don't even know, but these are things to me that, like, someone that's living in Boston lives in a $2 million house is paying less taxes here. They don't care, right? Or they should sell their house.
Just someone who,
It is really interesting. There are a lot of folks who don't want to see development. But if you want more of a tax base, you need development. I mean, you half jokingly talked about the Dresden Fields as a possible place for some local housing or multiple use facility. You can see a childcare facility on that property. But but we also, from a larger standpoint, like the whole weighting study, when you look at it, it's acting on our professed desire for equity. And having come from a place that, this is like, for me, it's like turning the world upside down. I came from a place where we were fighting to redistribute money from communities that had a lot of wealth to communities that didn't. And now I'm on the opposite side of that, and I think we're feeling that. The grand purpose of all this is equity. And that means that there's going to be some kind of redistribution, and if we want to maintain what we have or not pay as much as we might otherwise, we're going to have to start to think about things that have been third rails around here. Like, maybe there's some more development down Route 5. And maybe there is a sewer system.
Dartmouth's not taking new patients, as someone heard at NPR, because they have no workers. It's a problem.
Yeah. So, sorry.
No, I agree, Jay. I'm totally, that's why I'm trying to get the word out. I mean, unfortunately, there's only 10 people on this call.
So they need to talk to 10 people, and then
that's what I'm
they
saying.
need to talk to 10
select
people.
board, get it out more.
But I mean, you're right, that was a good reminder, Jay. I mean, we voted as a board to support this because we, as a board, believe in equity across the entire state of Vermont. And we're experiencing huge growing pain as a result of that, and I'm sure there will be a solution, but it can't come from just the 6 of us sitting at this table plus you guys. It kind of has to come from the whole town.
We voted to allow them to study,
right,
not to actually implement it.
Well, I think
we know what we're doing. Yeah. We know it's about it. We know that at least you're trying. So. I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get any further in this discussion tonight, unfortunately, but thank you for the update on the weighting study and deciphering the model that's coming, because I didn't think it could be made any more confusing than it's not. So with that, let's move down our agenda here, and next up, we have kindergarten enrollment, so Sean's going to tell us we have 100 kids coming into the school.
And our problem is solved.
And they're all English language learners.
Right, exactly.
Please.
I can't follow these conversations with anything that's stimulating. But I will say, on the lines of failed systems, we had an error in the way we're keeping track of our pre-K population, our pre-K 3s, and our pre-K 4s. So So in anticipating next year's kindergarten, our numbers were wrong. So to date, after Jessica go through and write our system a little bit, we have 29 kindergartners enrolled. We looked at past years, and we typically get between 5 and 10 during the summer. So we're anticipating we'll have about up to 39 kids. We applied for 3 teachers for those spots, so I think we're still okay. We were anticipating the numbers we had before. We anticipated that we would have only 3 at this time. Good news is we fixed it, so now we know who is 3 and who is 4 and who is 5. We were sending out registration information to other parents. We go back and say, kindergarten? Really? My child just going to be turning 3 years old. So I just wanted to update you on where we were with that. We aren't going to be having head assistants in our kindergarten because this class is really small enough for our teacher to be able to handle. I think it will balance a little bit of the cost now. But I apologize for that error.
So how, you said 43 is what you anticipate, is that after 5 to 10 summer months, so you off by 3 or 4 students, or you off by 13?
We're up for 13.
So how many do you have enrolled before? You've got 29 enrolled now.
So we had thought that some of our 3-year-olds were 4-year-olds.
Got it.
That
seems like sort of true.
we're not making them jump.
I know, they have 3-4.
That's not 100.
And I will post a sign by the road that says English language learners wanted.
All right. Is that it? Question? All right. Next up, we have, I should have covered this a little earlier. We've got MOU with the town. We still are in the process of going back and forth with our town's attorney on next steps with regard to the memo understanding for use of the Lo-Fi nature area here and the use of the school for the rec program. It's an expanded MOU from years previous where we had just a 1 or 2 pager that was pretty straightforward in terms of the rec use of the building, mainly in the summer months. With the expansion of it, it's becoming a bit more formal document. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Good luck.
Thank you. And taking into account the deeds that have been in place. So hopefully, once we get through this process, it will be a document that is much easier to update on an annual basis and has some, is more solid in its legal framework. As I mentioned, we did send back some thoughts in response to what the town had asked to amend. Some of the things that we're looking at are just references to similar deeds and how the properties are to be used, and also looking at the cost sharing. So this is another thing that I hope to have tonight, because this is obviously then dependent on the next step, which is the ability to begin the next phase of the process with building the trail in the Lo-Fi interior here too. So in order to move that along, if there is going to be a need for a special meeting, this might be something to tap onto. I hope that we can get through this with the town in the relatively near future to sign off on this and then move ahead in that regard. It is not ready to be signed tonight though, because of these few items that hopeful that we can get progress.
When you say deeds, are you talking about Friday deed, and is there something happening to it?
No, I'm just saying that it's getting into language, how it all came to be. So the school districts gave over Hunt Meadow, and then doing that, that gave access to the Pike property, which is there. So it's just putting that out all into paper and determining where the understanding is in the property usage.
Can I also note that summer camp prices have jumped 30% this year.
I was not.
So they're up to $160 a week for 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. care. So as we talk about affordable childcare in the Upper Valley and looking for local options, I don't know what in the MOU we're charging the town, but it was $50 a week when I moved here, and to go over the course of 8 years to $160, I mean, it's a little bit untenable. Just putting that out there, as
We're
everybody's
trying to
talking
revert
about.
back to where we were.
Yeah, so initially, when we had this one-page document.
I'll go talk to Roger and stuff.
Yes, so we'll, that is part of what we're going back and forth on, is the cost sharing model. And
you don't have something.
thank you. I will try to get this document out to you prior to any special meeting or the next meeting, and we can figure out how to move forward. Because as I mentioned, it is important that it gets signed off so that we can take our next steps with the trail system. Any questions at this point? I'm sorry, I don't have more to provide.
Do you need any help from us?
Oh, it's just, we're going back and forth, and it's, part of it's have been a little bit slow in getting back through the attorneys, but we'll get there soon and make progress on it. Okay, not seeing any other questions. Let's move on down. This next item, VSBA resolutions, is more of a reminder for both me and to you, in that, as you know, we are back on the October in-person so far with Maury annual meeting, which is fantastic for those of you who have not been able to attend in person yet because of the pandemic. But the VSBA resolutions, as you have seen in previous years, are what boards request of their the VSBA is lobbying the state in terms of what things to focus on. So this is our opportunity now, if you're interested, to propose resolutions for the other school boards in the association to agree to put before the VSBA to work on with the legislative process here. We have not, I don't think we have put one or two for the previous year's motion with regard to and negotiations. Yep. The reason it's here, though, and as I say, it's a reminder, is that we do need to settle on any resolutions that we as a board would like to forward by the June meeting. So if you have any you'd like to consider, send them through the meeting, we'll get them out to board members in advance of the June meeting. At the June meeting is when the board is able to forward the school board association. We would then take it and put it before just the resolutions committee. Yep. And would review that resolution along with all others that any other school board has moved forward. Resolution committee then gives us recommendations on whether or not the association as a whole should vote to recommend or not recommend. Get that right? I'm missing this.
99%.
Oh, 99%.
Yeah, immaterial to the discussion.
Okay, good. That's good. Any questions on those, or if you do have thoughts on resolutions, if you have questions on what type of resolutions you could put forward, let me know. You can go into the VSBA webpage, and the resolutions from previous years are listed there. And there's probably even previous videos of the explanations of the resolutions from the resolution committee and why they decided to or not to move ahead with this. So that will be our June. All right, next up is the facilities update. And there's a lot here, I see.
You get to relax for a moment.
Okay. I'm going to turn over the floor to Business Administrator T, who has a lot of information here on our issues.
Yep, but nothing you have to decide tonight, and I know you haven't had a chance to read through it all. So I'm just going to paraphrase it, because there's no decision that have to be made right away. I just want to bring you up to speed on where we're at, okay? So as I typed this afternoon, sorry, it's been a bit busy in our office, we have shared the Hanover High School March Intensive a presentation regarding the Marion Cross septic issue and possibilities that Jeannie Kornfeld, I'm gonna forget people's names because I didn't write it down. Chrissy Morley and Scott Stokey worked with that March Intensive to do a lot of research in a short period of time. They met with a lot of the same folks that we've been working with and reached out to state folks who we've been working with and did a really great presentation. And so now we've posted it here for folks who might have missed it at last month's board meeting. I'd encourage everybody to go out and watch that, and the kids did a fantastic job. Also, they brought to light, as did Chrissy Morley about 2 years ago, I think, when we were, embarking on our septic journey into possibilities, that the innovative alternatives that are available at the state of Vermont level have steadily been progressing. There's been some turnover in personnel at some key levels whereby people are more comfortable with innovative alternatives and or they even call them experiential alternatives. That's what they call it. Experimental, okay, alternatives. And there's been some rewriting of some of the, not necessarily the laws, but some of the processes that they now allow, whereby one of those that this March Intensive really zeroed in on was called making the liquid effluent that comes out of your septic pumping system that now has to go into the ground somewhere, making that what they call swimming water quality, okay? That doesn't mean it's drinking water quality. That still means it does have some BODs and other items. All my notes here, we just had a meeting, BODs and TSSs in it, but they're of a level where it's not really harmful to someone's health, okay? So we had a meeting, what's today, the 4th? We had a meeting yesterday, myself, Tony, our engineer, Jeff from Pathways, and Steve Ravel, who's the hydrologist, and we were following up on what some of these ideas were that were brought to light somewhat by March Intensive and also through our ability to sit down with Terry Shearer and Kristen, and I can't pronounce her last name, so apologies. Look it up, it's in the presentation here. So we went over like some of the possibilities that they brought up and what are some of our next steps. We were pumping through the end of April with our system. We just started dosing our fields and our beds again, effective this past Monday. Appears to be fine. There was, as we mentioned, I think it was at the last meeting, there was an E. coli hit on some activity that was out on the green. We noted it and took a bunch of samples. We're pretty positive that it's coming from the storm water that's, either going by some other systems that are having issues that we may know of. And we're sending a letter to the state of Vermont to let them know what's occurred, because we want to be able to move forward with fixing our system, and they need to know that there are other systems around us that exist that may be presenting problems. So we've talked about coming up with a plan as we move into what it will hopefully be our final season of pumping this coming winter, and keeping track of everything this coming winter and then that following spring, to also do testing in the storm drains around us. And if we get a hit, to immediately notify the state of Vermont so they can come down and do expanded testing to see what's going on with areas around us, because it's not us, okay? We're confident of that. right now, we're going to be working on, we're gonna notify Kristen at the state level, who's an engineer who deals with innovative alternatives, and we're gonna ask her some expanded questions based on the meeting that she had with the students about what some of the other possible alternative designs might be, because basically the type of alternative design that the students brought us was about pre-treatment, okay? And it's a type of pre-treatment system is the algae wheel. And there are other pre-treatment systems that exist as well. So we just want to make sure that we're looking at all of them and you know, what fits us best. In addition, we're going to be doing some testing of the property around us down the side of Girard Way, right before the brook and the adjacent property, which is the church. We may go onto their property down by the back side of the brook and do a couple of test pits down there to take some geological samples and see what the makeup is. We know a lot about all of our property because we've done test pits and taken samples. So we want to know what we're dealing with, because we have a couple of different ideas to go back to the state with about the possibility of adjusting the permit that we already have in place. We realize that if we can keep it more local, obviously it's the cheapest, right, most reasonable way to do it. We're also going to be testing the strength of the effluent because that's part of it. So we'll be doing that within a couple of weeks. And that's not done in the building, it's done outside by the company. And they will be testing it for a period of 24 to 48 hours. And that'll be in a couple of weeks because we really want that tank to be able to turn itself over. It's been, you know, sitting with stuff in it. So I think we're going to invite Terry Shearer down to see when we're doing the test pits, just in case he wants to be present. He was here the last time we did some test pits. We'll let you know what that date is, Sean, so you'll be aware. So that's it on what I have for an update on the septic so far. There was one comment that was made, if folks are watching the film, that I did follow up on. And the town of Hanover has not said that we can't come, we can come. The only caveat that they made was that in the state of New Hampshire, if you're sending effluent, it has to be an agreement between town to town. It can't be a school district to a town. Vermont's a little bit different than New Hampshire. So that's all they said. They still have capacity for the school district, if that's a need. So I know you had somebody online that had a question about septic, so do you want to take that now before I go into food service?
Yes, Mark, should be able to talk once you unmute. Just name again and address.
Great. Thanks, Mark Aquila, New Boston Road again. Thanks for the update since last month. I appreciate the progress in terms of what's happened. I'm optimistic hearing you say that potentially this winter might be the last one we pump. What sort of thing could happen in the next 2 years to address that? Like, do you think there's going to be a new system, or can you expand on what that plan is?
Well, we've always hoped to be able to bring the school board. We were hoping to be able to bring a design forward to the school board this past fall for this spring. And we weren't able to do that due to some legislative conversations we would need to have about, you know, the sister districts. And in light of this other work that we knew that was going on. So we're moving forward as rapidly as possible to see if some of these innovative alternatives will indeed fit our needs, and that we could hopefully bring the information to the school board for them to be able to make a decision for warrant article in the next round of voting.
Am I allowed to follow up?
Beyond that, I don't have a crystal ball, so that's our hope.
Okay, So it sounds like the hope is that a plan is submitted in the next year, and then obviously acting on any plan would take the planning, execution, and construction of whatever that is. Is that fair?
That's fair, that once, should we bring a plan forward that makes sense, once it's ratified by the voters, it would have to go out to RFP, full bid.
Yep.
Yep, and then that would take, 30 days, selection of contractor, ground, depending on the magnitude of what the building is or not, right? If we're able to use our own beds, I'm not sure. We're still looking at that possibility. So it'll depend on what we find out in the next 2 to 3 months of testing.
Will any testing occur in the next month, per your knowledge?
Yes. Some of it will, and then some of it will have to occur. It will take a little longer to get results for the soil samples and testing.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, food service. Food service? Okay. So as we've been discussing, I don't remember what months it was, but there is a bill, we call them bills in Norwich. There is a bill, S100, Senate Bill 100, that was passed out of the Senate, went over to the House. It has to do with universal school lunch, free school lunch, breakfast and lunch. I think it went to the House. They have now rewritten it, done an amendment. I think they're looking to hopefully get it passed. It's been sent back to the Senate. The amendment, as I see it, requests free school breakfast, and then a committee to look into what free universal school lunch costs might be. And so that's been sent back to the Senate floor. I've attached it here. It's supposed to be discussed again tomorrow. We're kind of a little bit in limbo. We have been moving forward with making some alterations, additions, and upgrades to our food service area here in an effort to be able to increase the quality of the products that we're delivering to the students, to do the delivery in a different manner with the finishing of the cooking on site, as long as it's approvable, with the septic and how we're dealing with it. However, there's a little hitch here. If S100 passes in its amended state, I believe it does away with the ability for us to have a waiver from participating in the National School Lunch Program. The National School Lunch Program, in order to outsource that to a vendor, or they call it a FSMC, a food service management company, that takes about 90 days. It's a lot of work. I've attached for everybody to take a look at the steps and the documents you need in order to do that. I started filling out, I have done it, okay? Done it because I had a different district and 11 schools that participated, but we'd be kind of starting from scratch because we've never participated before. And there's about 11, 14 exhibits that you have to create. And it can be done. I'm hoping that if they do that, they would give us a year in which to comply, because I hate to rush into something and get it wrong. Not that you can get it really wrong, because they have to approve it at every step of the way, okay? It just takes more time if you get it wrong. So we have briefly had discussions with one of our sister districts, the Richmond Middle School specifically, that is a self-op still, that has a chef and folks on site that are not a management company. And we had early conversations kind of waiting to see what direction this takes, and spoken to them about how the operation here could be handled potentially out of their kitchen with some of their staff, coming on site because they happen to live in Norwich and they start from here, and it just really sounds like it might be a really great way to improve the quality of what we're doing with an immediate change for next year that shouldn't take an act of Congress unless, of course, we have to go through the whole hiring of a FSMC. So I'm just letting you know that I'll probably, for the next meeting maybe, hopefully they will vote on something tomorrow and we'll have a better, firmer direction to take. If we have to do National School Lunch Program, we can do it. We'd be looking at, probably it's going to take 30 days to get the RFP and all the exhibits together. State has to approve it, has to go out for a certain number of days, has to have a committee. We'd be coming back to you in probably end of July for some kind of determination on who to hire. I don't think a lot of people for the size of it, and it will probably have to be a satellited program. I don't think there'll be a lot of food service companies, because it's so small, that will bid on that. I'm thinking there'll be one, okay? Which is fine, because they're very good at what they do, and they're very local and close by. And it was, quite frankly, before Richmond Middle School started conversations with us about this, it was quite frankly a direction that we had thought about going. Would be to satellite it out of one of the Hartford schools that's very close by. Who has a food service management company that Sean and I are both familiar with because we've worked with them before.
So can I just jump in for a second, because I'm a little confused between what we may or may not do it with middle school staff or with this satellite company. Is it determined on whether S100 passes? Would be one of the other?
Yes.
So S100 passes, we go for National School Lunch Program.
We'll have to.
S100 does not, I mean.
If it passes with that deletion in it, right now, the other bill has the ability for you to prove that, and we are currently making, free food available to students who qualify. I mean, we've always done that, even though the exemption's kind of different. Title 16, it's 1265 and 1264. 1265 is the exemption. They've altered that section of it, okay, with S100 at some point in time. So depending on what format it passes in, it looks like it's going to have legs, it's going to pass. I just don't know what format it's going to be and whether or not they're going to tell us we have to conform immediately or whether they'll give us a year. If they give us a year, my suggestion would be to try to embark on bringing in RMS in a shared capacity with some of their FTE, who I know they do a fantastic job. If it passes, we have to go out to bid. We don't have a choice.
Okay. And if we do have to go the route of the National School Lunch Program, we did hear there are a lot of organizations out there that present help. Is that anything you can draw on?
I can call them. I don't know I don't know what kind of help they're willing to, provide. But it's a matter of we're going to have to figure out data that we may, some of it will be projections based on what we think will be, right? There's a lot of exhibits that go along with these. They're a lot of fun.
And one more clarifying question, sorry. So if it passes, the middle school does not qualify as an FSMC no matter what?
They might.
Okay.
But they don't want to embark on National School Lunch Program because of all the regulations.
Gotcha.
They won't bid. And neither will our current provider. Because it's a lot of people.
For those of you that don't, if we can go with that RMS thing, I mean, my son goes there and
Yeah.
really good.
Well, that's why I was wondering if we could.
It's healthy.
Yeah.
I mean,
We could maybe ask them if they wouldn't embark on that journey. They could, if they wanted to deal with all the paperwork. When you do National School Lunch Program, you have to fill out a lot of paperwork every single day that you provide meals. On every single menu that you do, it's a lot of work.
Most places have a food service manager. For that.
Yes, they do.
Are we the only school in Vermont that doesn't do national school?
I think there is 2. And in New Hampshire, I think there's 4.
Yeah, I'm just curious. It may be too late in the game, but I've heard arguments like, I think I would have been working with legislators to try to get a carve out in this bill that would, because if we're only talking 2 schools in the state of Vermont,
Who are complying with the
I
laws.
mean, it may be too late, but I gotta think that there's language that can be inserted as an amendment that would allow us to offer the meals, but maybe have either a grace period or some amount of time that we can. It strikes me, if you're trying to comply with this program, I understand that, you know, yes, we can do it, it's just a matter of workload.
So I will email, I'll email Jamie Curley tomorrow, once I see what's going on with it, because I think they may have latitude to do that, even once it passes. Because a lot of the bills who have passed, we have had latitude because Norwich is part of Dresden.
Right.
You know?
It just feels like it would be lovely if we could say, we're gonna meet all the requirements by using our existing system that just happens to be on the other side of the river.
I mean, they gave us a waiver for the summer food service, I don't remember the number, but the 1 year, the half a year that we did it, they gave us a waiver for that in order to use Dresden because it wasn't a Vermont food service, but we didn't go through the whole RFP process.
Quality on this food has to be, everything I've heard is excellent.
Oh yeah, Austin's,
Yes.
Really good.
he's very special.
Yeah.
My son makes me not have school. He comes home raving about it.
Yeah, and one of the employees whom we would try to do here is an amazing chef in her own right.
And sorry to keep, I think they also do it the right way by ingredients, and it's a lot of really good stuff. It's not just buy mass stuff through a school. It's done properly, locally. It means like there's so many good things. At least that's what I've heard. What's going on? So if we can get it, that's like a pretty big deal.
And less paperwork is less of everyone's time. So I'm all for that.
That's my update. I will say Austin did write a letter to the school board about all of this, but I'll share it as soon as I know what direction we can go.
But that's not included.
No, it's not. I didn't want to do that without, I don't know if Sean's had a chance to read it. So we haven't, it's been crazy busy in the last couple of weeks. I think that's it for our facilities, the most important one, right? That's it. We talked about all kinds of stuff going on here the last time we were there with Tony. I think we're good.
Anything for you this one?
I think we're good.
Figure that.
Sorry, one question I wanted. Playground, is that moving ahead? I mean, are we really waiting for septic to be approved before the playground is going?
Anything major, I would say.
My understanding is we can't begin to put anything out here until we know it's going to be put up. To the exception of that, we can do some work on the other piece that we know is ledge.
Who's the next meeting?
Right. Yes, there's a meeting coming up, and they've invited me for some reason, I would imagine, to move forward on something. So
I think before the next fall, it'd be nice if there was a few things
Newer
we spent their
things.
budget on, like
Yeah.
basketball hoops, maybe paving things, maybe a little bit, just
spruce it up.
spruce it up, maybe get that box out of there, like a
I drove by today and I looked and I went, okay, yeah, we need a better spot for the box, so
There are a
yes.
few things before next fall that would be nice to get outdoors. That mud pit out there, for example, by the swing set that's filled with water. These aren't big ticket items.
It's on our horizon.
Is there still a mud pit out in front of what used to be the second grade door?
In front of Lindsay's things, the one.
Yeah, there was one that, like, yeah, for like 10 years was a humongous puddle every year.
That was vernal pool.
Yeah, the vernal pool there, okay. Yeah. That one might be nice to get rid of too, since it's been there for a while.
Maybe, can you just have, you were trying to put together, so what's going to be the summer time, and that'll be good for us and for the parents. We just need to. Good, Sean.
So take the pressure off.
Maybe we could even have a work day if necessary.
Yes.
Over the summertime.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Or the tractor.
All right, thank you very much.
Oh, you're already assured.
Seriously.
Yeah, we have to.
All right, I should check to see if there's any questions. No more here, any in the audience, attendees, not seeing any, we'll move along. Next up is the school board calendar and the topic templates, which we have the attachments there. Another as well, yes.
I'm so complaining tonight, I'm sorry. October 5th is Yom Kippur, and April, where is it? 5th is the beginning of Passover, first night of Passover.
Okay. So.
I can't attend either of those.
No, I understand that. I'm not as familiar with the full, what's affected on either side of that too. I mean, is there other times within that first week? Dates would be okay
So,
to avoid the stuff?
In terms of October 5th, Yom Kippur starts on Tuesday at sundown and runs until Wednesday at sundown, but it's a fasting holiday, so you really want to stick around Wednesday at sundown to eat.
So Thursday the 6th is possible.
Thursday will be. In terms of Passover, that runs for a week, but it's really mainly the first 2 nights that are important, so Wednesday and Thursday night, so
It could be Friday or something. Well, you might be set up on those and the other board members look at their calendars a year out to see if that might be possible. I'll have Brian. Yeah, I'll have it.
those are the big ones.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry, we typically review all of our calendars for that. All right.
It says that the board retreat is Saturday, May 14th of 2023, but Saturday, May 14th is a 2022 date, so I'm assuming it would be a different date for 2023.
No, give me a second.
Is, unless it's.
This is.
Unless we're not moving forward. I'm just. So I'm kind of like.
We'll reconsider this at the June meeting.
Yeah, so it would be May 13th. Sorry, I just managed to scroll through.
So you said Ryan, take a look at that. Let's just transition. Did anyone have anything on the agenda template? I am going to we will keep facilities on until as long as the septic system is resolved. I will promise you that. Anything else?
I feel like we should add the weighting study every single time until that gets settled. I mean.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
I'm
willing to accommodate that request.
I'm just trying to think of things that need to be irregular.
Anything else? Okay. Let's, when we get to it, we'll approve the topic agenda that we'll bring on the calendar.
Sorry, I have one more request. Can we add the Dresden meetings to this as well? Not just the SAU on the calendar, just to have it in one place.
We usually have one that I usually put out as a.
Okay.
I don't know that Ryan does that. I usually put out, because I do it for myself.
Right.
I put all 4 districts meetings on one doc, so I'll make sure it's short.
Is everything in 2023 the wrong day?
Yes.
We're just gonna bring them.
Sorry.
Bring the whole thing back. Yep. Okay. If there's nothing else there, let's move on to business plan action. We do have to amend the consent agenda, obviously, because on the calendar and the approval of the memo. So, if someone wants to.
Yeah.
Move to approve items B, E, E, and F by consent.
Second by Lisa. All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous, thank you. And how about just the school board? Yes.
Move to approve the school board topic.
Second by Lisa, all those in favor? Yes, thank you. We'll go back to calendar next week. And that gets us into our communications and reports. First up is the chair. And my report is short. Again, we did have a number of the teachers here earlier today, this evening. And I would also like to express, again, Bill's incredible appreciation for all the work they've done, especially over the past year, or actually the past 2 years in the midst of this pandemic. It has been extraordinary, and we recognize that. Going above and beyond every day. So, I really, it's hard to find ways to express how much thanks we have as a board. That noted, since we do have a number of our administrators here too, I don't remember if we've got an administrative appreciation week, so.
We should call staff appreciation week, everybody.
We just call it staff.
So let me just extend thanks to you all too, because if I don't, you certainly shouldn't be like that. The work has been extraordinary too, and the amount of meetings we go to on a regular basis during the day and in the evening. We're up until 9 o'clock, and it's a little long tonight, so thank you for being here.
We did get cookies in our boxes.
You did get cookies.
Oh, nice.
So,
We should
That
put
was
some
the high school.
yes.
Yeah.
So,
So good.
High school gave us books.
That was nice.
It's nice.
Thanks. Well, anyway, thank you very much. Much appreciated. The only other things I have that are not appreciation related is that we do obviously have a retreat coming up on May 14th. I have to apologize, I was out of town for work that day. I did, however, reach out to the Vermont delegation yesterday and already have 3 positive responses from Representatives Brigham, Maslin, and Senator Coleman. We didn't hear back from Senators Parks and Nick. But they're happy to join you all for that first hour of the meeting. And I will just mention that my subcommittee of facilities is meeting tomorrow. So Jamie, Tony, and I, 8:30. We all
Reminded me.
we all know we're meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Okay.
And actually, we are going to have a new member as well. So John Robb, who is a parent of 2 in the school district, and the director of facilities of Simon Pierce. So you guys entered that down to help us out with that. We will talk about potential further membership, and you're all welcome to attend 8:30 at the SAU conference. And I think that's all. Are you attending? What Kim is planning?
I've just been going just to stay up to date with that athletic one, just see where it's next. So I'll just go straight to tell me what's going on.
All right. Principal's report is next. And Sean, I keep hearing that people are having trouble hearing you. So you could just.
I'm gonna give him his own microphone.
I know. Thank you. It's going to be quite the image on the owl here.
So I noticed my report
Top of
is,
your head.
that's okay too.
That's okay.
It's hearing we're having a
It's-
problem, not
yes,
seeing.
okay.
So my report is not attached, I noticed, so I'm going to give it to you verbally, which is equally as great, and Jessica will attach it tomorrow. Enrollment-wise, we stayed at the same numbers. We had 310 of the same students, actually, that we had last month and the month before. We have some end-of-year events coming up, which you can look for the dates when you get this tomorrow. We have Bike to School Day. We are planning on doing an open house on the 25th. Parents have just been itching to get into this school, and we've been wanting to have them here. So we're gonna have A through M, last names of A through M come in at one time, last names of M through Z come in at a later time, just to come in, see the school. We have parents of second graders who've never been inside this building. So we're thinking it's safe enough for us to come in. We won't have people linger, but they can see where their kids' classrooms are, spend some time, and just at least get one venture into the building this year. So we're excited about that. We have set the date for the 6th grade celebration to June 13th, with the rain day of the 14th. We enjoyed so much having it outside on the green last year that we're going to do that again. It just was a nice space. Worked out well. Let's see. Instead of a field day this year, we're going to do a school-wide day of play, which is something that predates Greg and I. We haven't been able to do because of the pandemic, but Mr. Newton's request in his retirement year is he leads to the day of play. So for him and everyone else who's going to enjoy it, that's going to be on the 15th of June. And the 16th will be our last student day, 17th for staff members. We have been
talking about special, are you doing May Day this year? May Day?
May Day. We are not doing May Day. Not doing May Day. Teacher Appreciation Week, as you mentioned, is this week. Greg and Jessica and I have been appreciating staff. Today I took a drive over to Hanover High School. We brought everyone breakfast sandwiches back, which were so great and delicious. Tomorrow we're going to treat them to Lou's for the morning, and the PTO is bringing in something great for them on Friday. So we've been appreciating them all week. Scheduling committee, we've spent a lot of hours contemplating how to best meet the needs of kids here with the schedule. We're finding a lot of kids are coming up through that have had some negative effects of our mask wearing. We've seen some kids that are really struggling with basic literacy skills. So as a school, we've decided we need to really emphasize this coming year literacy and math, particularly literacy. We set our goals back months ago that we wanted large chunks of uninterrupted time for math and literacy instruction. We wanted collaboration so our specialist teachers could meet with others. Back to you guys now. I'll just rotate around the owl. And we wanted to make sure that we had enough social emotional opportunities within our school. So those have been our three big areas, but they are totally conflict with the way things have been done at varying across school. We have a lot of specials. When you try to fit a lot of specials into a schedule, you just can't get large chunks of uninterrupted time. So our solution, we think, is going to be a 7-day rotation of specials. So Secretary French gave all Vermont principals a gift of this great software for making schedules. And we've been using it, and you can plug in any number of scenarios and it will pop out the schedule for you. And the 7-day special schedule seems to give us enough time so that kids get all of the specials, not as many over the course of the year, but they get the same 7-day rotation, and it allows us to have uninterrupted chunks of time. We also want to make a schedule where we can have special educators, interventionists, speech and language go into classrooms and deliver instruction. We want to change up our model of literacy instruction K2 to be more of a center and rotation based instead of like a whole class lesson for kids. And that'll allow speech services to be embedded, intervention services to be embedded. Pretty exciting stuff. So we think the 7-day schedule will do that for us. I'm hoping that the June meeting I can bring it and show it to you because you'll be as excited as me, I'm sure, to look at that. It's a bit of a struggle. Change is hard, and we're used to things a certain way. But we keep going back to what are our 3 big goals that we want to do with kids, and we want to stick with kid focus. So that's exciting. The other thing I want to report on is we are having a lot of trouble with attendance. Adult attendance in our school. So we have, on any given day, between 4 and 13, 14, 15 people out. It's something that we're really going to have to look at for the coming years. It's not just our school, it's across the state and nation, but it's wearing. It's it's wearing on me and it's wearing on the staff who do come each and every day, because I'm spending the first hour of our day catching up. We have very few substitutes, a few parents who have stepped up, but they sometimes have to do other things. So every single morning, Joy and I are spending telling people, thanks for coming to work. You were expecting to do job A, but you're going to do job A, B, and C today. And it's taxing on them. So we have to, as a school, figure out what can we do to curb that, because it's not sustainable to do what we're doing every single day. It's too much on the people who come consistently. So that's something we're going to have to look at, and hope as a staff that we can tackle how do we get a handle on that. Stuff like that. Other than that, we are enjoying our mask welcome policy. We've got kids and staff who still wear masks. We have some people who wear them at certain times and not others. And it seems to have been just a pretty natural, smooth flow. Haven't seen any stigma or any problems with that, so that's great. That is what I have for you. I'm sitting next to the owl. I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Sean? So why are there so many absences? Is it sickness, or is that built into the contract so you can just take it? There's a limited number of days you can take off.
There are a lot of days you can take off. So we have, staff have 15 sick days, a number of personal days, bereavement days, professional days. There are a lot of options for days. We have been asking people, don't come to work if you're sick. I think we're going to have to think about, don't come to work if you're contagious. Wear a mask if you have a cough, but you pass that contagious smell, because we have people who are doing what we ask. They're staying home when they have any symptoms of sickness, and it's just a lot. This is also the time of year where people start taking personal days. So if you have 3 personal days, we've got people that have put in for all of them between now and the end of the year, and that just piles up. Lots of people. So it's just a number of factors.
Thank you very much.
One last positive note, I just want to send a thank you to the 2 people behind me, Rhett and Robin, who have been coming to all of our scheduled meetings. It's so great to have that bigger perspective come to the staff, or for Robin to come in with ideas from different places, and for Rhett to come in and say, let's think about this as for our special ed population and other kids. So just appreciative. Thank you.
And next we'll hear from Assistant Superintendent Ross.
Thank you. Since everyone else is bringing you chair.
Yes.
The new trend.
So I have been with the scheduling committee, but really it's been my pleasure. I love actually working on a schedule, believe it or not. So I've really been enjoying the process and appreciate being able to help out. We've also been working on preparing for our summer curriculum work, which is exciting. So I've sent out calls to people to see if they want to do any kind of summer curriculum work, and that's in the works at this point. We have scheduled our math PD. We've completed 2 sessions, and so far that's been going really well. We've gotten good feedback about it. We have our 3rd session coming up next week, and that will be split up between K-1-2 teachers and the 3rd through 6th grade teachers. And we have already scheduled our training for next year, so that's really exciting. And then I've been working with Sean most recently today on our new title grants. We're spending down the old title grants, and now we're looking at ways to spend the new title grants, so that's exciting. And talking about the playground, we did receive the vaccination grant. I think I talked with you about that before, but that was close to $4,000, and most of that is being spent on the preschool playground, which is really nice, because that we had open access to the funding. It wasn't limited in any way, so it's nice. We wanted to give something back to the kids, and we knew that was a great place that needed some additional work. So I think that is all I have for tonight.
The summer curriculum plan, what is that going to look like? The teachers are looking for 1, 2 days at a time? Or no?
So it depends on how much time they have. Last summer, I worked anywhere from 3 days to up to 5 to 7 days, depending upon how much time people had and what area we wanted to work on. I think this summer, the nice thing with the math curriculum is the curriculum is already all laid out. They're long-range plans, so you can look at it week by week, month by month. And then all of the unit and lesson plans are attached to the program. So it's all electronic. I'm going to upload it into our SAU 70 curriculum drive that I created. And then I think we'll probably do some work on that this summer, but also in some of the areas that we really need to expand upon, like science and social studies. So we'll continue with that. But the strategic planning is really helping with that as well, too, because I think it will give us more of a long-term goal in terms of, the subject areas that we undertake over time.
Do you schedule to get a curriculum as a teacher from possible?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've just asked for volunteers because I know it's just been such a stressful year for people. But some people like to do the work in the summer and it's paid. We put money in the budget last year for it. So it's a nice time to actually just be able to sit back and think about what we've been teaching and the learning that's been taking place and making revisions. So I had quite a few volunteers from Marion Cross last year when we first started, and I think I'm already seeing a few people from the school this year. So, oh, and also in terms of COVID, as you heard from our most recent update, we're still not seeing high numbers here, and that's continued into this week. It's been relatively minor in comparison. So,
here at MCS as opposed to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here.
It's doing better than high school.
Yes, for sure. So.
Thank you for tracking that.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Thank you for all
Just
that.
thank you.
ELA, so is that math I've heard a lot about?
Yes.
Also that, remind me again, is there a plan for ELA?
There is, but I haven't laid it out in terms of which year we'll work on ELA. We have been talking about it here at Marion Cross in terms of intervention materials particularly, but ELA is just, it's such an enormous undertaking because there's so many different components. So I feel like it's just going to take more time. And, now implementing the math curriculum next year, I feel like that is a big leap for us as a district. Bringing the two schools together, K through 6, going into middle school. And I don't want to overwhelm people at the same time. So I'm all gung-ho about, moving forward and just jumping into ELA, but I also don't want to ruin the momentum that we have in the math program. So it's kind of balancing out all of those pieces. That makes sense.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, but it's definitely on the radar. So.
Well, I went out of order there, my apologies to Superintendent
Oh, sorry.
and to you. It was my fault. That's quite right. Going on to
No, sorry, I know what was next.
Yeah, sorry.
So I just want to echo Tom's sentiment and Sean's for staff appreciation. We tend to recognize everybody in my letter to the staff. I explained how everything that everyone does here supports teaching and learning. It's certainly a team effort. Everything from our custodial services, really preparing our learning environments, to our administrators who supervise and actually touch every aspect of our education system. We're all here to make sure that our teachers are able to do the great work they do. On another note, I want to give just a quick update on strategic planning. We're actually planning. We're actually doing a strategic plan at this point, so I'm really happy to see progress. We have 4 subcommittees that are meeting. I did attach a copy of the timeline to the public area of board docs. And Ryan created a checklist for us, and I can say there's a few more checks that belong on this particular version of the document. We did send out surveys based on the Patel for Kids work that we're doing around portrait of the graduate. So those surveys went out to staff and parents. I'm not sure if they got it out to the students yet, but I think they're planning on doing that at the high school anyway. So that's done. And then the ongoing subcommittee meetings will get larger and larger as we start to add expertise along the way. And some of the issues that we'll be dealing with, well, actually the 4 subcommittees themselves are our academic subcommittee, our student support, we're calling it systems and operations, and now it's organizational alignment and effectiveness, and facilities. So that's where we are right now. We do have a meeting coming up on Monday for our strategic planning steering committee, and the function of that committee is really just making sure that as the subcommittees do their work, we have a chance to report out and make sure that we're aligned and working in a way that allows us to have a coherent time. So that is my update. Lisa?
Yeah, just a quick, I noticed on this update, the student support meetings weren't on here. So just on May 11th at 3:30, the student support subcommittee is meeting, open to the public. It's at Hammer High School. But more importantly, on May 18th at 7 p.m., we will be having a focus group open to the entire Hanover Norwich community to talk about anything and everything that feels important under student support. We'll have, hopefully, I'm looking at Rhett, my co-chair here, we'll hopefully have some initial goals and recommendations for people to react to, but really to just sort of make sure that we're capturing what people feel is important. So, thanks.
Yes, Lisa, I'll check with Ryan. This is from last week. So she may have already updated it.
And she, we were a little tardy in getting her dates to her,
Oh,
so
okay.
please don't throw her under the bus.
All right, thanks very much. Now it's business with
I'll stand up. No, oh my God, my hip's not gonna like me anymore. It's kind of weird standing in front of the wall, I'm just saying. So I posted you can hear me, I'm gonna stand back a little. I posted the Norwich end of year projection, this is a report through April 30th. Did that later this afternoon, sorry, it's all the way there. And the overview of the end of year projection is for your general fund, okay? You have expanded reports that go along that back this up. The projection of additional receipts and the encumbrance column, which is your third column over, may not, I know they don't, exactly match your expanded reports that you have, because that includes my projections of what I think is still coming in and or what we're still going to spend that has not been encumbered yet. So at the end of the day, we're projecting a positive variance in revenues of $63,729. That may go a little bit higher as the special education expenditure reimbursement report isn't done until the end of June. And then they also make an end of year adjustment often where you get a little bit more if they up the percentage. So that number is always, we usually don't really know that number until August. But right now, we're projecting a favorable $63,729. As you know, with expenditures, we always try to project worst case scenario, meaning that we're going to try to spend out most of all of what's left in the areas that we think we need to spend. Okay, and so all of your objects here, those aren't actually objects, I'm sorry, those are functions as well. Those functions are your department codes. So the Dresden assessment is what we pay to Dresden for middle and high school. And then they just go right straight down from there. 1100s, we are over budget in the 1100s, and that encompasses quite a few different FTEs that were unbudgeted that we hired. Also, some, I believe that probably may encompass some programming changes that we made. It was a while back too when we made those changes. So You can look at the expanded report and see exactly where those areas are. I also think some of it had to do with changes for people for insurance levels and some of the benefits. And then everything else is favorable. School board services is showing over budget. I don't know.
It's a lot too.
Yeah, it's encumbered. I'm trying to think, hold on.
And it also shows just in the last few.
Yeah, I'll double check the school board services. I have to look at that. Okay, sorry, I might have miskeyed there. Which will mean that you have more money left over. So if I made an error, I'll fix it tonight and repost it. Okay, and if I didn't, I'll just put in there what it is. The school administration principal's office, that's a change in benefits levels that caused that overage. Let's see, student transportation to and from, we ran one less route this year. And then the difference between the savings and the route is the uptick in diesel fuel costs. Special ed transportation, when we budgeted 9 months before the year started, we didn't know what we didn't know. So we're over a little bit there. And in building improvements, we'll be over just a little bit. We wanted to finish up some projects. We didn't spend all that. Food service transfer, we didn't have as much need as we had anticipated, and that's been adjusted in the next budget forward. If we embark on NSLP for the next year out, that whole number will change because it won't be necessary. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So potential revenue variance, when you add it with the expenditure variance, it shows us with a positive surplus fund balance of $99,590. Again, we'll update this in the next month out because a lot of the encumbrances will be trued up more in all the different areas. So I don't expect that number to go down. If anything, it should go up. That's for your general fund. I also attached numbers for our federal funds. I know they met today, right, to spend out a lot of the lines that are still remaining in the federal funds area. Right now, we have federal funds available to us for this fiscal year of $388,724. Looks like we have spent or encumbered year-to-date approximately $205,655. Some of the salary lines, we don't transfer them over to general fund. We don't transfer them and recognize them here. They have been recognized in general fund as offset, but we don't recognize them here until we file the report, okay, because we have to file the reports quarterly. So in the IDEA B, Title 1A, and ESSER 2 salary lines, those will be spent down. I know that Robin and, like I said, Sean and Ryan met today, and they'll be encumbering a lot more of these other funds. I don't think we've booked ESSER 3 yet. So ESSER 3 will be opened up probably with the new fiscal year. And I think ESSER 2 carries till December. So ESSER 2 funds, some of the funds shown on here, they carry over into your next fiscal year. Okay. We also attach food service, that's through March, because our food service information runs like on a 1-month lag. So this is showing you through March. Right now, year-to-date column, the second one, we're pretty flush, $638. So that's not bad. But we're over. We're more in expenditures, about $638 more in expense than we've taken in revenue. But that's pretty flush. And then the last report I think we attached for you is the Medicaid report. And we did not use any Medicaid offset funds last year. Historically, every year we've used Medicaid offset funds to offset salary expenditures in the regular ed instructional line for our tutors, okay? We've not transferred any money at this point in this fiscal year. I'm gonna wait until we get into June to see what the reimbursements look like coming in and the true up before we decide whether or not to transfer any of these monies over. If we're running really low, because we don't wanna cause a big hiccup on the use of surplus funds from one year to the next. We kind of want to smooth that out. So if we feel that we need to transfer some money over to get our surplus funds for the next time we budget up a little bit, then we'll transfer some of that money over. Otherwise, we'll leave it there and let it roll over. Okay. That's it for right now.
Any questions?
I'll check the school board.
Yeah.
Might have been a key in here, it was all me, so.
No, well, thank you.
All right,
Thanks, Jamie.
All right, that brings us up to our need for executive session. We do have a number of teacher hires, leave of absence, requests, and then look at that support staff contract and then come back and vote on all of them. So I've entertained a motion to enter into executive session. Lisa?
Motion to enter into executive session at 9:29 PM in accordance with Title I, Section 313, for the purpose of discussing personnel.
Second by Neil. All those in favor? Thank you. Yeah.
Hello? Oh my gosh, incredible. I'll be out in just a second. Thank you. What?
Creating executive session.
They are.
I just started a few months, that's
Yeah, okay, we'll keep on making work.
You are the best for still being here.
Well, I had, tech delivery while you guys had me.
That was really smart. It's okay, I was texting because I needed to know whether the power was on at my house, so I could send it just came back on 5 minutes ago, so I sent my son is no longer at your house, Tom. He's now home because we have power.
It is 10 o'clock.
Well,
Well, my daughter does the same here.
I sort of thought, envisioned him being, well, there's no power at my house, which means I can have a shower, can I just stay?
Is that allowed? You can talk me through this, because I'm.
Are you guys ready to?
Yeah, let me just, I'm gonna log back in, hold on a second.
No way.
I just-
We signed our
Okay, sound good? Okay, we are back in session. Cedar, we're good? Thank you.
Yeah, you're all there.
All right, thanks for doing that. We've returned public session. We have an approval of leave of absence and resignations. Yeah.
Move to approve the leave of absence for Ross McGee and to accept with regret the resignations of Karen Woodward and Patrick Gordon.
Second, Lisa, all those in favor? Yes, thank you, and thank you to Karen and Patrick for the time here. Approval of new hires. Motion? Yeah.
Move to approve the hiring of Heidi Freeman as a 1.0 kindergarten teacher, and Carlo as a 1.0 physical education teacher, and Devin Burkhardt as a 1.0 fifth grade teacher.
Thank you. Second by Lisa, all in favor? Yes, thank you. And finally, the approval of the NEASS contract. Keep going.
Sure. Move to approve the NEASS contract as presented.
Thank you. Second by
Just keep
Lisa.
going.
All those in favor? Unanimous, and I will express thanks to the NEASS negotiating team led by Patty Williams, and as well to Liz Morse for the work on that. So thank you. Move ahead. And that is all we have. If board members have adjournment topics they want added for the next meeting, please do reach out. As I suggested, we'll have a special meeting between now and then. That's all I have. Awesome. We have to go into adjournment. Neil, second by, thank you very much. Wow.
Thank you.
Down to 4% of batteries. Just in time. Thank you, Cedar.